Meeting, August 28th. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight we're going to start out with the swearing in of a new police officer, and I'm going to hand things over to Lieutenant Slavin.
Thank you to members of the board and the public for our time this evening. Special thanks to Judge Holt for swearing in tonight. On behalf of the Superintendent Beatty and the members of Tredyffrin Township Police Department, we're excited to present and swear in our newest officer, Jonathan Mundell. After an extensive hiring process, which consists of a physical agility test, written test, background investigation, polygraph, and psychological examination, Officer Mundell accepted a probationary condition of employment. John was born and raised in New Jersey, and after high school, he attended Camden County College, where he received EMT certification. In 2013, John graduated from the Delaware County Community Municipal Police Academy and started his police career with Sharon Hill Borough Police Department. In 2017, John joined the Philadelphia Police Department, where he proudly served until accepting our offer of employment. John brings with him 10 years of law enforcement experience, and we all know he'll be a great addition to our ranks. Joining John here tonight is his wife, Paige, his daughter, Peyton, and his twin boys, Carter and Lucas.
Please raise your right hand. I, Jonathan Mundell, being duly appointed, a member of Tredyffrin Township Police Department, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the laws and ordinances of Tredyffrin Township, that I will at all times maintain true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will obey the lawful orders of duly appointed officers senior to me, and that I will discharge the duties of police officer of Tredyffrin Township with loyalty and fidelity. I also solemnly swear that I will uphold, obey, and enforce the law without consideration to any person's race, color, gender, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicap, or disability, and that I will discharge that duty with loyalty and fidelity. Congratulations. Welcome to Tredyffrin.
Congratulations. Welcome to Tredyffrin. All right, we will move on. Tonight we have multiple public hearings, and I will start by calling to order a public hearing to consider and possibly adopt Ordinance H.R. 468, approving the Verizon Cable Franchise Agreement. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Chair Gussie. I have marked the following board exhibits for the hearing this evening. Board Exhibit 1 is the proof of publication of the notice in the Daily Local News on August 4th, 2023. Board Exhibit 2 is the proof of publication of the notice in the Mainline Times Suburban on August 6, 2023. Board Exhibit 3 is the email distribution list and the email sent for the public hearing for those wishing to receive the notice dated August 11th, 2023. Exhibit B4 is a copy of the proposed ordinance for this evening, and Exhibit B5 is the franchise renewal agreement, which will be adopted via the ordinance. Those are the board exhibits for this evening.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance HR 468?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right. Hearing none, this is a roll call vote. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion carries. And I'm going to close the first public hearing and move to opening the public hearing for HR 469, amending Chapter 16312 of the Code of Tredyffrin Township to adopt Upper Marion Township's new local limits for the industrial pretreatment program. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Chair Gussie. I have marked the following board exhibits for the hearing. Board Exhibit 1 is the proof of publication of the notice of the hearing in the Daily Local News on August 4th, 2023. Board Exhibit 2 is the proof of publication of the hearing notice from the Mainline Times and Suburban, dated August 6th, 2023. Board Exhibit 3 is the public hearing notification email and distribution list, dated August 11th, 2023. And Board Exhibit 4 is a copy of the proposed ordinance for consideration this evening. Those are the board exhibits for this hearing.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance HR 469?
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comment from the board? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, we will move to this vote. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. And now we will move to I call to order the public hearing for HR 470, amending the Code of Tredyffrin Township, establishing Chapter 203, Woodland Conservation. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Dr. Gussie. I have marked the following board exhibits for this hearing. Board Exhibit 1 is the proof of publication of the hearing notice from the Daily Local News on August 4th, 2023. Board Exhibit 2 is the proof of publication of the hearing notice in the Mainline Times and Suburban, dated August 6th, 2023. Board Exhibit 3 is the public hearing notification email and distribution list, dated August 11th, 2023. Board Exhibit 4 is a copy of the proposed ordinance for this evening. Board Exhibit 5 are copies of 6 emails received by the Township today supporting adoption of the ordinance, which were received by the Township by 4 p.m. today. And finally, Board Exhibit 6 are copies of additional emails received that are neither opposed or in support of the ordinance, also received by 4 p.m. today. Those are the exhibits for this hearing for the board.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance HR 470?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All right. Do we have a second?
I moved it. I don't know. Did someone second it? I'll second. Okay.
That was tricky. All right. Do we have any board comment?
Yes, Dr. Gussie. So the Woodland Conservation Ordinance is an important step towards protecting our trees. I would like to acknowledge and thank the many hands that have shaped it from its inception to an ordinance. It's not perfect, but we have a fairly strong ordinance today. And one of the biggest challenges facing Tredyffrin is stormwater management, and that's the result of years of development without ample consideration of stormwater exacerbated by the intense downpours of storms resulting from climate change. And it's not just the families flooded out of their homes or people in cars swept downstream who are affected. Our first responders' lives are endangered when they rescue them. And trees protect us by slowing down the rate at which water reaches the ground, by absorbing the water when it reaches the ground, and also as it evaporates, by preventing it from reaching the ground in the first place. And unlike stormwater basins, trees are inexpensive to plant and do not require annual maintenance and inspection. Native trees also create a habitat for birds, so deserving of its bird town designation. Tredyffrin is one of 2 places that I have lived in with the largest number of birds. So just last week, my wife and I heard 5 different species of birds from just one walk in our neighborhood during the routine walk, and that Tredyffrin is a bird town, and that's obvious. And trees provide habitat for birds. So now, trees need protection because of the time they take to grow to maturity. My wife and I were married 40 years ago today, and it is somewhat sobering to realize that if we had planted an acorn that day, sometime around now, it would be reaching maturity, and it would continue to provide years of enjoyment and protection, hundreds of years of enjoyment and protection from here on out. Now, like municipal codes, the ordinance seeks to balance the rights of property owners and the impact on our neighbors, and a balance that is required for us to live among our neighbors. So by way of analogy, we would not object, most likely, if one of our neighbors happened to bag a deer and butcher it in the backyard. But if that neighbor were to open a rendering facility, we would not be happy, and we would expect our ordinances to protect us. So I think the Woodland Conservation Ordinance is an important step, and I strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just echo what Bhaskar said about the importance of this woodland ordinance, and also pointing out that many people had their hands in it to get it to a workable state, and I really appreciate all of their efforts. This ordinance really is a long time coming, and I'm just very pleased to have it on our agenda. Do we have any other board comments?
Chair Gussie, I'd like to say, and you took the words out of my mouth, I want to focus on the long time coming, a lot of hard work over the years. I think I've been on the board the longest, and it's always been floating around in my mind, and it's been out there, but not with strength, because we didn't have the support from the EACs of the world or the other groups who might support woodland conservation ordinance. We didn't have the board wherewithal to fight for that, and it's just great to see, after this long battle, tonight come to passage. I've said this before because I got excited even before we were at this evening, when we're actually going to vote on this ordinance and this woodland preservation. It's key for our township. It's nice to be joining other municipalities who have had these types of ordinances for years, and I'm just thrilled that we're here tonight. So I support this ordinance with my whole heart. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
Mr. Martin, it seems to me that the administrative burden for enacting this ordinance would be somewhat minimal. There's enforcement by police in the township, taking of permits. Can you describe your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're going to have to see how that goes. It's going to be generally most of our things would be complaint driven, so we'll certainly monitor that and see if there's any impacts beyond what we're anticipating. But we won't know until we enact it and see how it goes. But I think this is a good first step in addressing the concerns of the environmental groups as well as the board.
And I will say that in our ordinance committee, our staff weighed in quite a bit to get it to this place to make sure it was something that was feasible, hopefully, from the township. Any other board questions or comments?
Yeah, the only comment I would make is that a lot of words have been used about this battle and the struggle to get this done. And from my perspective, I mean, I only been on the board less than a year, less than 2 years. Most of this came as positive feedback from residents saying we really want this enacted. I have not heard a lot of pushback against the woodland ordinance, and mostly been just supportive. This is a good idea. Obviously, there's been a lot of tweaks and changes to the way it's been structured from the original drafts. But I've been pretty impressed with the overwhelming resident support we've heard and the fact that we've tried to listen to the concerns and address them. So that's the only point I would make about the ordinance.
Any other board comments before we move to public comments? All right, we will move to public comments.
We have one virtual. I don't know if you want to start there or start in the boardroom.
Okay, and since we do have a fair amount of people here today, can someone turn that one off? Sorry, it's just hurting my ears.
We're just going to need to make sure when people come up there, they turn it back
when
on.
people come up.
No, for the court reporter, they have to use this one that's connected to the...
Okay.
Yeah.
So just a couple of items. So when you come up, make sure that you state your name and your address. And since we do have a lot of people, try to keep your comments brief and try not to repeat comments if you've heard kind of a similar thing. And try to not come up again if you've already spoken, just to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. All right, so why don't we start with a virtual hand since we have them raised, and then the next person can come up and make sure to turn the mic on.
Elizabeth Feinberg. I'm at 114 Jolin Road in Paoli. And I really appreciate the supervisor's support for the ordinance that I've heard so far. I strongly endorse the ordinance as a resident and an environmental advocate in the township. I appreciate the volunteer support that has led to this ordinance. And I think it's critical that Tredyffrin Township demonstrate a commitment to stewardship and protection of trees. This ordinance will help do that. As a resident over 20 years, I've seen immense amount of damage to trees through activities of public works, parks, maintenance practices, and policies that degrade trees. I've seen damage by homeowners and commercial and development activities. And I really strongly hope that there are resources put behind the ordinance to help achieve the fullest benefit that it can bring the township, both in terms of resource protection, water and air protection and improvements, as well as quality of life improvements. Trees are have quality of life value, as demonstrated by a lot of studies. So thank you, Ann Murphy and her array of people for bringing this forward, and I appreciate the support that the supervisors have just verbalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to do another virtual, or do we have anyone who wants to come up? We could do every other. All right, we'll start with an in-person. So go to this mic and then make sure to turn it on. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Emily Bell, 103 Old Forge Crossing, and I am also the chair of our community's tree committee. And as such, I have realized that once people understand the benefits that we enjoy from trees, they are usually likely to protect and support their care. And in addition to what Supervisor Basker had to say about stormwater, I'll add that a tree with a 25-foot canopy can manage a 1-inch rainfall across 2,400 square feet of impervious area. I've seen different statistics on the per annum contribution per tree, but the FDA has it at 11,000 gallons. So if we extrapolate that out across the township, we're talking about millions of gallons of stormwater. Additionally, heating costs reduced by 8%, cooling costs reduced by 18%, air quality improvement, particularly with regard to the particulate matter that we saw with the Canadian forest fires, to the tune of 10% in a dense canopy. And they counter pollution in other ways as well. Also benefits to physical and mental health and property values. So in closing, I'd say that if we were all presented with a civil engineering solution to absorb millions of gallons of stormwater annually, return it to the atmosphere as breathable oxygen with no energy use and no dangerous byproducts, I invite you to consider that we would probably be trying to figure out a way to fund that solution. So I strongly encourage you to pass this common sense measure to protect a tremendous asset of our township. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll move to a virtual citizen.
Hi, I hope I'm on. This is Jefferson Sanka, 315 Green Road in Berwyn. I'll keep this short. I'm very much in favor of this ordinance. I think trees are amazing. The more we learn about it, the more we realize we should keep as many trees as we can. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in person who wants to come up? All right.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Williams, and I'm at 851 Richards Road in Wayne, near the Valley Forge Park. I'm a member of the Glen Valley Garden Club, and I'm speaking in favor of this ordinance. Our neighborhood, Glen Hardy and Brookmead, have had an unprecedented loss of native, mature hardwood trees due to age, disease, and pests. In my yard alone, last year, we had to cut down 3 huge ash trees because of the emerald ash borer. And my neighbor, who has a red oak tree, which is dying, and the branches are falling down to the road because of the oak scorch. To help mitigate this situation, our garden club gave away 60 native trees to the homeowners in our community. We believe it's vital to maintain our trees in the face of climate change, where the trees absorb carbon dioxide, emit oxygen, and their shade reduces the summer temperatures by 10 degrees. That statistic varies from 5 to 22%, depending on which website you look at. Dr. Doug Tallamy's research showed that trees also support our ecological food chain, essential for our birds, population, and the healthy environment in the community. The neighbors I spoke to about this ordinance agree that it's important to keep healthy trees. One of the new residents in our neighborhood cut down every single tree in their beautifully wooded lot. They did not replace it with any hardwood trees. And as you've already heard, the trees act as a sponge for stormwater management and mitigate flooding. They're a natural part of the rain garden. We may think that one lot with trees cannot help with an environmental concern, but a Blue Planet Award winner, which is equivalent to the Nobel Prize, found otherwise. He identified tiny forests or pocket forests on postage stamp-sized plots as having big benefits. Our yards can be pocket forests. We respectfully request that you adopt this ordinance and keep our township beautiful and promote the health of its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another hand online.
Hello, this is Claire Lewis from 17 Chateau Circle. I'd like to echo all of the comments that I've previously heard, but in particular, I want to say kudos to Anne Murphy and the many people who have volunteered so many hours in promoting our community's understanding of the benefits of the positive stewardship of trees. I think it's so inspiring to know that there are so many citizen advocates for this ordinance, and I really urge you to accept it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Thomas of 1230 Rose Lane in Berwyn. And I just want to, I know it's already been stated, the stormwater value of having the trees, but I just wanted to add, it seems like a very common sense positive thing as it's written in the thing. And I think even like fiscally and to the goals of the stormwater, having this tree ordinance is really important. We just witnessed recently development up on Bodine Road where they actually cleared out an entire grove of trees reportedly to make space for stormwater management system, which ironically is probably very counterproductive to the objective, and especially since we're actually starting to impart stormwater fees. This is hitting us like financially and fiscally. This has real cost, and I think that considering this and that whole thing is a very common sense thing to do. So I appreciate your consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Good evening. Yeah, my name is Paula Quinteros, and I am a resident from Tredyffrin Township. And sorry? Oh, it's Paola, and last name would be Quinteros. So I want to say that my address is 837 Old State Road in Berwyn, and I am in favor of the Woodland Conservation Ordinance passing, and I'm here talking with you because I've moved in this area since the year 2021, and ever since I've seen like areas in the neighborhood around my house that have been cleared. I live in a very wooded, hilly area, and some of these areas have been cleared and they have been replaced with lawn. And just in my street, in the last year, there've been like 15 or so trees cut. So I don't know. I'm in fully support of this ordinance passing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Alyssa Robbins, and I'm at 21 Rampart Drive in Chesterbrook. Not only is this ordinance welcome, but it is long overdue. I have lived in Tredyffrin Township and Chesterbrook for over 20 years. The people that lived in this community over 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, planted trees and thought of us in doing so. They planned for our future, and we have squandered their legacy with every patch of woods and every tall tree we cut down. The owners or managers of the corporate parks in Chesterbrook seem to be in a free-for-all when it comes to this abuse. 601 Lee Road, which borders the soccer fields at Wilson Park. There used to be thick woods of very tall trees and lots of smaller trees and plants on the border between the two parking lots. Excuse me. One day this spring, I drove by and they had cleared the entire 1/4 acre lot, except for some single standing tall trees that they left. It is now grass, and they've planted a couple of non-native small evergreens. The woods that was there for us provided shade, flood control, animal and pollinator habitat, oxygen, climate and temperature regulation, and carbon sequestration. There were woods cleared at 725 Chesterbrook Boulevard to build a parking garage in an area that, that already had huge parking lots and that are almost always empty. I have never seen it used, and yet it added a long 2-story ramp of impervious surface that is also a heat sink. 14 trees removed at 945 Chesterbrook Boulevard in the last month. Several giant trees, 2 of which had stumps with a 5-foot diameter, were cut down recently at 600 Lee Road. The stumps and woods did not appear diseased to me. These were natural and financial resources that were gifted to us from the past, and we have destroyed them. Planting a new small, non-indigenous evergreen in a place where woods once stood where a 50-foot tree once stood, does not replace what was lost to all of us who depend on these trees in the present for our health and protection from storms and flooding, and in the future for any kind of recognizable, survivable climate. Please pass the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
My name's Chris Redmond, R-A-D-M-O-N-D. I live at 101 South Valley Road in Paoli. There's an old saying that punishable by a fine really means legal for a price. That being said, I'm very glad to see that the fine structure in this ordinance is substance enough that developers cannot use it as a cost of doing business and blow it off. It's very well written, very strong. I think this ordinance represents real advancement, both scientifically and aesthetically for this township, and I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, Jennifer Cox, 82 Pew Road, and also a member of the Environmental Advisory Council. So I live on Pew, which is pretty much a forest. When I moved in 11 years ago, you couldn't, the canopy was contiguous. And just speaking for not just my block, but other blocks, sort of like, I don't know, Pew is like 3 or 4 blocks, I guess, long blocks. There have been 8 clear cuts over the years, the last couple years, and just along those blocks, and for development, for no good reason that I could see. I know that people have been concerned when trees fell on their property, and that's understandable, but I've seen people like overreact to that and get rid of like every tree on their property. So I'm really happy that Anne got this going and that the supervisors recognized the importance of this, because it was really important. And I think we have something in Tredyffrin that other townships don't have, other areas don't have, even in Chester County. We have a lot of contiguous woodland still, and it's very valuable, and it really makes our township special, I think. So I support it, obviously, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. Richard Kunin, K-U-N-I-N, Chair, Trout Creek Watershed Residents Association, residents on Richards Road. I can't agree more with what everyone preceding me has said and what the members of the Board of Supervisors who spoke said. This is a very important ordinance, and it's about time that something like this came along. There are Oh, here we go. Sorry, thank you. It's more sensitive to touch than I am. But the Trout Creek Watershed Residents Association supports absolutely this ordinance. However, in reading the ordinance, we found some very serious and important concerns. And I'd like to review those concerns, and I hope everyone in the audience realizes that I fully support the ordinance, but want it to go further. And I feel that the points I'm going to make will help you do that. First of all, Section 203-2, intent, regulate, is not defined in the definitions. It seems like an obvious idea, but we need something that is very, very strong in this ordinance. Regulate means governed by certain requirements as stated herein. I propose that you add that to the ordinance. Hazardous trees, number 2. There appears to be no process for determining what, quote, verifiable structural defects means, or how this would be determined in an objective manner, or who would be or is qualified to make such a determination, and what that person's qualifications must be in order for him or her to make those judgments. Going back to one of my favorite topics, Wayne Glen, I was on Walker Road one day and I saw a fellow with a clipboard looking at the trees. I stopped, I asked him what he was doing. He says, I'm the arborist for Arcadia Tree Land Company. I'm here to locate specimen trees to preserve them from being removed. That was his arborist. And you know what? There was one tree in 26 acres on that property that was preserved. One tree. I pause on purpose. We recommend that the person who makes these judgments be a certified arborist who is not employed by the developer, for obvious reasons. Number 3, non-viable tree. There is no definition in the ordinance of what, quote, dead trees, substantial visible dieback, or trees in severe decline means. On my property, we let a tree go for a year without leafing before we cut it off. We will not cut off any tree that has even one leaf on it. How would these qualities, dead tree, substantial visible dieback, trees in severe decline, how would this be determined in an objective manner? And again, who would be qualified to do so, to make those judgments? We repeat that this person must be a certified arborist, not employed by the developer, or I would say even a property owner. As it is written in the ordinance, it appears to be a subjective determination as to what a tree in severe decline is. There's no description. What does it mean? A tree may be presumed dead, as I said, if it has not leafed within a year. Why doesn't the ordinance say this kind of thing? Give it some strength. Section 2035 requirements, you need to add, for the purpose of this ordinance, no tree may be removed from any property 2 days prior to or during a weekend, holiday, or whenever the township offices are closed. And you'll sit there and you say, that's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. But I know of a situation in Greenwich, Connecticut, where a property was being developed and there was a group of trees on the property that were considered valuable. For whatever reason Greenwich considers them valuable, they were considered so. A neighbor saw that the trees were going to be removed on a Friday. He went to the city government and he put in a request to stay the removal of the trees. Well, you know what? The offices were closed on Friday. They reopened on Monday, and the developer cut down the trees over the weekend. You really need to do something to prevent that from happening. I'm really serious. I really mean it. Exemptions. Trees removed in the following circumstances shall be exempt from tree removal permit and the compensatory planting requirements. Now let's see what that says. Arboretums or open land conservancies, I don't understand why they're exempt. It doesn't make any sense to me. They have trees. The trees perform the same function on a non-profit property as they do on a profit-making property or any other private property. They do exactly the same thing, and they should not be exempt. Dead trees and hazardous trees, number 5 and 6. Again, there is no definition in this ordinance of what, quote, dead trees or hazardous trees means. In an objective sense, it's fully subjective, but not objective. It needs to be objective. And again, who would be qualified to make these determinations? Payment in lieu of planting. When an applicant demonstrates, this is F, when an applicant demonstrates to the satisfaction of the township that the lot cannot accommodate all required compensatory trees. I'm saying, what is the criteria for demonstrating that a lot cannot accommodate all required whatever they are, trees? There is no objective standard in this ordinance to cover this contingency. A developer can say, well, I wanted to build the driveway in that where that tree is. Well, so what? So he puts the driveway somewhere else, or he redesigns it. Section 203-6, permit plan requirements. Applicants for tree removal permits shall provide information to demonstrate compliance with this section. The applicant A shall provide a plan which includes the following. Number 4, special consideration for protection and avoidance of removal of heritage or specimen trees shall be noted on the tree removal permit application. When a heritage tree is proposed for removal, the plan shall be delineated and address the reasons for removing the tree. And I'm emphasizing we add any design alterations considered to save the tree, not just design considerations. All consider, because there could well be something that the developer said, oh, you know what, they'll like this plan, so I'm going to leave it out. We don't want developers getting away with any funny business at our expense. Change. Did it again. So what you have to do is you change any to all designated alternatives considered to save the tree. And the township will then be able to see that truly every possibility has been covered. Because when the developer says, here are all of the considerations that I've come up with, you can come up with some more. There's always another answer to any question. Trees which are damaged during construction by heavy equipment operation over their critical root zone or other incursions beyond the limits of disturbance shall be evaluated, and if they need to be removed, they shall be added to the replacement calculations. That's what the ordinance says. Now, let's see what it should say. This ordinance does not require identification of trees that may be damaged. Let's see what those trees really are, and the developer can drive his bulldozer over a tree just because he doesn't want the tree there and say, well, gee whiz, I couldn't avoid it. We need to know that stuff in advance. This ordinance does not specify, again, who will determine the extent of such damage or what that person's qualifications must be to make such judgments. You have to include that stuff. This is a good ordinance as far as it goes, but it does leave too much open to interpretation. The Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code states that no municipality can write an ordinance that covers 100% of possibilities. Hence, municipalities must grant waivers and variances. Well, the idea is to cover as many possibilities as you absolutely can. Leave as little to the imagination of the developer as possible. These possibilities include firming all of those areas of the ordinance that are subjective in nature and do not state specifically who is qualified to make the required judgments. Again, I repeat on purpose, I think it's a very good ordinance as far as it goes. It needs to go further, and it can go further. Now, if you pass it tonight, I won't argue, but we have to know that it's open to these amendment possibilities. It's absolutely essential that we not give those wily old developers an opportunity to get away with murder, literally, of trees. It's not reasonable, it's unfair to the community. You owe it to the community to make this ordinance as powerful as you possibly can, because you've got a very good idea. You have a real lion. Now it just needs some teeth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the detailed look. All right, come on up.
I'm Tim Lander, 1914 Hawthorne Place, Paoli. I've lived in the township for over 40 years, and for the past 20 years or so have served as a volunteer with the Open Land Conservancy, and currently serve as president. So I'm here to offer the Conservancy's support for the ordinance. I want to respond to the comment about our exemption. We do remove trees only in cases of hazards or dead trees that might fall on a neighboring property or one of our trails. As a nonprofit, we don't have a lot of money, so we try to avoid taking trees down whenever possible. On the other hand, we've planted hundreds of trees in the past 10 years or so. I expect to plant another 100 this year, and so we voluntarily more than make up for, the ones that do come down, either because we take them down or storms take them down. But we have no problem removing ourselves as an exemption if that makes it easier for anybody. It just doesn't really make a lot of difference to us one way or the other. We serve the western third of the township, protecting the Valley Creek watershed, and do a reasonable job of that, but we need all the help we can get in our territory as well as across the board in the rest of the township. We don't trout Trout Creek, and they need as much help as anybody. So we do support the ordinance, and hope you can pass it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. I live at 79 Old Forge Crossing in the Old Forge Crossing condominium complex, and I am also a member of the tree committee there. And over the course of the last 4 years, within our community, we had an arborist come in and put a proposal together, which at one time included removing over 145 trees. Boom. Just go do it because it needs to be done. We have now, through this work of this tree committee in the last couple of years, actually have planted 45 trees and only taken about 30 down. And those needed to be taken down. In reviewing your ordinance, and just as a way of background, I spent 36 years working for a little company in the beginning called Roach Brothers, which is now Berkshire Hathaway, Fox and Roach, as a sales associate, and worked with numerous developers in both Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware County. And they may not be real happy that I'm standing here, because I recognize in many situations developers come in, and as was already been stated, you clear cut, you cut down things that don't need to be cut down. The only thing that, and this is a first step that you have taken, I'm sure that there will be changes and amendments and things that are done. One of the things that most of the developers in this region have is pretty deep pockets. $1,000 fine for a tree. If you cut down 5 and you don't report it and you don't get what you need to get, that ought to be $1,000 per tree per day, because you'll get their attention, and they'll pay attention to the ordinance, and they'll live by the ordinance, and they'll make the proper applications. If it starts costing them $10,000 or $15,000 a week, all of a sudden they seem to pay attention to what you need to get done. And they will know it because it's in the ordinance, and when they present a plan, they will have to present it in such a way to show you what they are going to do and what they are allowed to do. And if they don't follow it, the fine should be more than $1,000 per tree. Other than that, yes, there are improvements that will need to be made, but I certainly think that you ought to consider the fining level of the biggest way to get somebody's attention on a regular basis, so that they get the job done in working with the township and preserve more trees within the township. And a fine is a great way to do it. I approve of what you want to get accomplished, and I'm hopeful that it'll pass this evening, and that you'll move on to make some of the changes that would make it more objective. And there are certainly arborists in the Delaware Valley at the moment. That's the only other thing I can say that I am aware of that no longer have an axe to grind. They don't cut down trees. They have no stake in the game, and they can come in and evaluate trees and tell you what's going on and not be involved in any way whatsoever. And if you need some of that information, I'd be happy to get it to you. Or Emily Bell also has information about an arborist that we use that has no stake in what we're doing. And when we get things done, it's bid out to others, and that arborist helps us determine what the best route is, and he has no stake in the game at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Philip Whitmer, 112 Kinlan Road. I might need to spell that, K-Y-N-L-Y-N Road. And thank you for allowing us to testify. As a Birdtown representative, I'd like to speak to this ordinance with a viewpoint of birds. Birds need trees. Many species specialize in habitat, even in a woodland. To reduce competition between species, some species will use the upper canopy, some will use the mid canopy, some the understory, and others more ground level. And so all of those areas need to be here, and they need to be healthy. For instance, many caterpillars will form in the upper stories of trees, like oak trees, and they'll fall into the leaf litter in the fall and either cocoon there or overwinter healthily in that leaf litter. So if we don't have those trees, we won't have some of those insects that birds require to make it through the winter, and some of those birds won't have the caterpillars that they need to feed their chicks in the nest. And so we need the trees if we want to have the birds. And I know that most people are aware of this. If you looked at a satellite picture of our house, even right now, you probably wouldn't be able to see the house. Well, that's not true today because we've lost a lot of trees. Our trees are aging. They were all cut at the same time, and so they're all the same age. They're aging out. There hasn't been a lot of planting of new canopy trees that are going to take their place, and so it's a very uneven kind of a thing. But even in our yard, where we have tried to save trees, we have lost some. For people who, I shouldn't say it that way, because we all need to have that part of the ecosystem to remain healthy. And in our yard, we now have a species count of over 90 birds. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Wilson. I'm an environmental scientist and a faculty member at Haverford College, and I'm a member of the Tredyffrin EAC. And I want to thank in particular the township staff who have spent hours, days, weeks, and months working on this, particularly Aaron and Steve. I strongly support the ordinance. I echo what a lot of my neighbors and fellow residents have said. This ordinance balances the needs of homeowners protecting their property, the character of the township, and the emerging woodland crisis in Tredyffrin. And the loss of trees in the township is a crisis. We are losing approximately 64 acres of canopy a year. That's about 48 football fields of canopy every year. So think about that when you drive past Conestoga, past a football field. It's a tremendous amount. And as everybody has said, our trees regulate the atmosphere and stormwater in the township. They are our biological stormwater infrastructure. You've heard a lot of statistics. Everything you've heard is true. More mature trees handle stormwater more effectively than smaller trees. And what other piece of infrastructure gets stronger 5 decades after it's in the ground? There's really nothing. And in particular, in this region of Pennsylvania, local tree removal is particularly urgent. Our canopy trees take many decades to reach their full height. So a tree that's removed today and replanted with a sapling is not going to reach the same effectiveness until the year 2080 or 2090, or even into the 22nd century. And this is why it's vital that we conserve this and we start planting trees now and preserve the woodlands that we have. In my field, we have a kind of saying that I teach my students, which is the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Well, the best time for a woodland conservation ordinance may have been 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. I strongly urge you to pass this ordinance today and adopt it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Molly Duffy, 118 Fennerton Road, Paoli. So I'm a former chair of the EAC years ago. And I'm here really not to talk a lot, but just to offer my support for this ordinance. I'm glad that it's here. And I've talked to Ann and Ray for years about this, so I'm glad it's coming to fruition. And I know that a lot of thought and reason has gone into it, so I'm offering my support. Thanks.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more person tonight.
Hi, Ernie Falcone, 290 Forest Hill Circle in Devon. And I live under a tall canopy of oaks, tall oaks. I've lived in the township for 32 years. And this is a very special place for me. I've got 2 stands of woods on either side of my house, and they are microforests. They are becoming elderly. And 2 years ago, I had an old man who was a climber. He went by the name Monkey Man, and he had to take down a couple of my dead trees. And I said to him, how come this is happening? And he said, well, they've got a certain life to them. And after a certain period of time, 125, 130 years, they just die. That's the normal course of things. And I think we might be in that kind of cycle right now. So not only are we facing down developers, but we're also facing down a situation where these trees have run their normal life. In my forest, there are owls, and last night I heard a couple of warblers. It's a fascinating place just to go out in your yard and hear these things. I am also a member of the Tredyffrin Historical Commission, and this goes part and parcel with what we're attempting to do with preserving 350 historical properties of interest. I'm also the advisory to the Environmental Advisory Commission, and these people have done amazing work. I fully support the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, a couple more.
My name is Scott Laird. I live at 942 Ivy Croft Road in Wayne. I will echo most of the comments that you've heard tonight, and I won't repeat them. I will only add one thing. I live on the east side of Crow Creek. Half my property contains woodlands. It's greater than 20% slope. But a lot of the houses in my neighborhood also have woodlands on much of their property, but some have clear-cut their backyards in order to create play space for their children in the past. But they also treat their lawns, and so since 1986, when I've lived there, I've seen the woodlands decline, and I've seen the number of beneficial insects decline. We do have a lot of birds in our woods, but the deer are ravaging. They have ravaged the woods, and there's not enough. They've eaten all the understory, and they're coming out into the gardens and consuming everything that we plant. We're members of Jenkins Arboretum. We're trying to plant native species, but then we buy them, plant them, and then they're eaten up. It's very difficult to screen them all, flowers and trees. But if you do amend this, I fully support the ordinance. Please pass it. But if you do amend it in the future, besides just screening the new trees you plant, you need to do something to protect them from the deer. I've seen the deer in the wintertime stand up on their hind legs and eat lower level of tree browse. So we need to do something. I know Parks and Recreation is concerned about the deer population, and they decide about controlling it. But you should link this ordinance to that aspect of it, because you can plant trees, but if the deer consume them, you've not gained anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jamie Barons. I live in 1048 Townsend Circle over by St. David's Country Club. Gentleman's last point was one I wanted to bring up. In our area, there are no young trees. The deer herds come through and they ravage them. The male deer strip the bark off the young trees while they're rubbing their antlers. The herd in our area is huge. It's up to about 28 in a small area. The whole township has problems with deer, and everywhere you go in the township, you can see the young trees are being ravaged. If you want to control the canopy, you have to deal with this problem. Otherwise, you have nothing coming up. And that means you're going to have hunts. You're going to have to clear out these deer, because we have a much larger deer population than is natural. The other issue I have is on our property, we've had trees such as Colorado blue spruces that are dying because they're not native. They don't adapt well to this climate, and then people put them in because they look nice and all that stuff. A lot of our trees we've had removed 7. We're being eaten from the inside out by carpenter ants, and we had to bring them down quickly because of safety issues. If you have a requirement to have somebody review the tree and stuff like that, you put it on the homeowner who doesn't have a lot of money, that they've got to remove these trees for safety, and you still have to pay all these things and services. And I hope you've taken that into consideration, because not everybody has the money to just pay an arborist to come and review trees and verify stuff and then plant replacements.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other public comments or questions? All right, hearing none, we will move to,
I just wanted to thank Ann Murphy, 5 Berkshire Terrace in Wayne. I just wanted to thank the original ordinance group that worked on this, particularly Tori Snyder, Doug Anastad, and Pete Goodman, the Board of Supervisors that worked on this study, and all the residents that have come out to us and reached out and told us that this was a good thing to move forward on. And one other thing, I wanted to relate a little story about something that happened to me when I was pumping gas at the gas station next to the Devon Post Office. A woman was next to me, and she came over to me and started talking to me, and she said, oh, I had just the greatest experience at Patient First. What a great place that was. And then she says to me, and oh my goodness, Devon State Road, those trees are amazing. Where I am in Canada, we don't have trees like that. And I was like, wow, aren't I lucky to live in a place where someone from another country is telling you have great trees. So thank you very much for your consideration.
all right, thank you. All right, we will move to the vote, and we'll start with Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble. Aye. Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. All right, and now I'm going to call to order a related public hearing for H.R. 471 to amend the Code of Tredyffrin Township, Chapter 181, Subdivision and Land Development to coordinate the requirements of the proposed Chapter 203 Woodland Conservation. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Chair Gussie. I have marked the following board exhibits for this hearing. Board Exhibit 1 is the proof of publication of the hearing notice in the Daily Local News on August 4th and August 11th, 2023. Board Exhibit 2 is the proof of publication of the hearing notice in the Mainline Times and Suburban on August 6th, 2023. Board Exhibit 3 is the publication hearing notification email and distribution list dated August 11th, 2023. Board Exhibit 4 is a copy of the proposed ordinance for consideration by the board. And Board Exhibit 5 is the review letter received from the Chester County Planning Commission dated May 26th, 2023. Those are the board exhibits for the hearing this evening.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance HR 471?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any board comment?
Yes, I would just like to add that, one of the reasons the ordinance took so long to make its way through is that we realized along the way that it had to be done in two parts. One is the change to the township codes, and the other one is the change to the subdivision and land development ordinances. So this is the second part of what we just passed, and we need to do both parts in order to make it happen.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Any public comments?
You just passed the wonderful woodland conservation ordinance. Needs a little work, but we'll do that later. But it's a very good ordinance. I'm really glad you did it. Thanks so much. But now that we're talking about the saldo, the subdivision and land development ordinance, let's take a look at section 181.52, required site landscape. Number 2, where it talks about existing tree masses, it specifies natural features, well, blah, blah, all this stuff, as specified in section 208-2 as a controlling factor governing, helping to govern 181-52. I just wonder why there's no reference made in this specifically to the requirements of the Woodland Conservation Ordinance. I think it would be a good idea if it did, just to give both ordinances additional strength. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, and there's none online, so we will move to the vote. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble. Aye. Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. And I will close the public hearing. And thank you to our court reporter. All right, and I call to order our public meeting, and we do have a few announcements tonight. The zoning hearing board that was scheduled for August 24th has been rescheduled for August 29th. In observance of Labor Day, township offices will close at 2 p.m. Friday, September 1st, and will be closed all day Monday, September 4th. We would like to remind residents that the Chesterbrook Boulevard Leaning Wall Replacement Project will be starting this month and will last through the end of 2023. Work will be on Chesterbrook Boulevard, southbound lane, over Wilson Run, between Adams Drive and Wilson Road. The project will involve upgrades to the existing stormwater system and replacement of 2 retaining wall structures on the upstream and downstream ends of the culvert carrying Wilson Run underneath Chesterbrook Boulevard. Please be patient and allow additional time. There will be some lane restrictions during the construction period this summer and fall. Open positions remain for the Zoning Hearing Board, Historical Commission, and Library Board of Trustees. If you're interested in volunteering, send your information to Tredyffrin@tredyffrin.org. There are a number of open slots for volunteers needed for Community Day on October 14th. To sign up, contact Hillary Mallory at the Township. Now do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 17th, 2023 public meeting?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 31st, 2023 joint public meeting for the Easttown and Tredyffrin Townships Board of Supervisors?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move to township business, and our board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss personnel issues. And we will move to supervisor liaison reports. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you very much. The zoning hearing board met Thursday, July 27th. It was actually a long meeting. We heard an application. Basically, people wanted to add a screening wall on a parking garage. That was granted. They had appeal number 1223. This was concerning setback lines on a piece of property. That decision will be rendered tomorrow. There's an application by the 13-23 by the Timothy School for four extra parking spots and a couple other things they wanted to change. That was all approved. The biggest thing they discussed there was they want to put a sign which would exceed the normal sign limits for the township, but it's on the back side of the building, so it wouldn't be facing anything except the railroad tracks, so that was approved. That was the biggest contentious part there. Then 14-23 was an application on 28 Briar Road for a new, basically to replace their garage. They wanted to move it to a slightly different location, and that was also approved. The next meeting is tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Humble.
Thank you, Chair Gussie. I have no report for Parks and Recreation because we did not meet in August. For Tredyffrin School District, probably many of you know or realize today that first day of school was today. So I just ask everybody to please be careful. You know, we're going to see a lot of buses around the neighborhoods now, a lot of students getting on the buses, so please be mindful of that and the safety and the speed limits in the school zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Holt.
Thank you. The only thing for tonight is that I would like to make a motion to appoint Jer Schertzer to the Municipal Authority.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments? All right. Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Wait. Sorry, did you ask for public comment on it? I know you probably won't have any. But
I guess I said, do I have any comments?
Okay, just want to make sure.
So it kind of covered both in this instance. I can pause. Do we have any public comments?
That's fine. I just want to make sure it's reflected in the minutes. That's all.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Anything else to report, Supervisor Holt? Okay. Supervisor Wysocki.
Thank you, Chair Gussie. I have several reports this evening. First, the pension trustees. Pension trustees met on August 9th for their quarterly review of the police pension fund, the 457 plan for non-uniformed employees, and the OPEB trust. That's the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust. After examining second quarter and other performance data and future economic and market projections, the trustees concluded that no significant changes in investment strategy were needed. Next meeting of the pension trustees is on November 8th, 2023. I have two reports on two meetings of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission met on July 20th. The Commission heard 4 applicant presentations, discussed each application, and heard citizen comments on those 4 applications. First, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend to the Board of Supervisors an amendment in the definition of building height in the Township zoning ordinance, changing it to match the existing definition of building height in the Township building code, thereby eliminating a conflict in definitions. Later this evening, the board will vote on authorizing a public hearing on October 10th to consider and possibly authorizing this amendment. Second, the Planning Commission heard the sketch plan application of Devin Dunkin' Donuts, 891 Lancaster Avenue. Devin seeking comments on its plan to add a drive-through component to serve the Dunkin' Donuts store and maintain the gas station use. The applicant will return, taking into consideration Planning Commission suggestions. Lastly, and I know I said 4 applications, there were 4, one was withdrawn after the meeting. Lastly, the Planning Commission commented on the sketch plan application of KinderCare Learning Companies, Inc., the lessee of 849 Lancaster Avenue in an existing shopping center. Center's former AAA unit is vacant, and the applicant proposes to use the vacant unit as a daycare center and to replace an adjacent parking area with an outdoor playground area. The applicant anticipates returning with a revised plan. And now, moving to the August 17 meeting of the Planning Commission, where there was one item for discussion. The Planning Commission met on August 17 and again heard a presentation by the Tredyffrin Easttown School District on the district's revised and resubmitted plans to construct 3 new athletic fields and related improvements, parking areas, and access drives on 2 district parcels to be consolidated at 200 Irish Road and 250 Cassat Road. After discussing the school district's revised plans and hearing citizens' comments, the Planning Commission and School District agreed that the district should respond to the few remaining Planning Commission questions, mainly having to do with traffic, and possibly resubmit revised plans for consideration before seeking preliminary approval or perhaps preliminary final approval at the Planning Commission's next meeting or a later meeting. The next meeting of the Planning Commission is on September 21st. That completes my reports.
Thank you. Supervisor Freed.
Madam Chair, I have no reports tonight.
Right, Supervisor Basker.
Thank you, Dr. Gussie. So the Environmental Advisory Council met on Thursday, August 22nd, and the EAC does not meet in July. So Margie Reinhardt of the Radnor EAC chair discussed the Radnor Eco-Friendly Yard Program, and there was some discussion about whether Tredyffrin could adopt that. Tiffany Kenny of Mother Compost attended to discuss options for offering composting to Tredyffrin residents living north and west of US 202. Now, thanks to Dr. Jonathan Wilson of the EAC, you can now monitor the salinity and water level in Krabby Creek in real time from your browser, whether it's on a phone or a laptop, what have you. And please contact me or anyone in the EAC for the URL to monitor that in real time. The EAC and Township staff has prepared a flyer on tips to reduce plastic waste for organizers of 5K races and rental of the Township facilities. Otherwise, the 5K races tended to produce a lot of litter of plastic water bottles. Now, fall events that are sponsored by the EAC, along with partner organizations, include on September 7th from 6:30 to 8 at Radnor Public Library. There's a talk on shade gardening with deer-resistant plants with Griff Tupper, senior horticulturalist at the Arboretum at Laurel Hill. September 13th, 6:30 to 7:30 at the Tredyffrin Public Library, there is a talk on how to design and build a rain garden by John Magic, a landscape designer at Greenweaver Landscapes. And September 23rd, starting at 10 a.m. at the Tredyffrin Public Library, there will be a rain garden tour and includes the library, Woodland School, and some local residences. The EAC will have a table at the Tredyffrin Township Community Day, August 14th at Wilson Farm Park, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and hopes to see you there. The next meeting of the EAC will be at 7 p.m. on September 26th in the community room at the Township building. Moving on to the Library Board of Trustees. The Library Board of Trustees did not have a quorum at its scheduled meeting on July 22nd, but met on Thursday, August 24th. The library won a, excuse me, I have to catch up with the scrolling here, won the Vatamere Award for Creativity in Libraries. So we'd like to congratulate the library staff for that. Jennifer Whipp was confirmed as the secretary, replacing Joanna Pasiolo, who had to step down for personal reasons. The board has a vacancy for a member from Willistown Township. So I know that Dr. Gussie had earlier said there's a vacancy on the board, but the vacancy is not for a member from Tredyffrin Township, it's for Willistown Township. And the way it works is that the supervisors of Willistown Township have to nominate someone who then gets essentially voted on by the Board of Trustees, and then that comes to the Tredyffrin Township Board of Supervisors for us to vote. So it's a multi-step process. And I have reached out to the Willistown supervisors. Others are reaching out. We really would like to get a candidate. So if you know anyone in Willistown who'd like to be a candidate for the Library Board of Trustees, please let me know or speak to them. So as you know, the library has had some problems with the roof and the HVAC, and the work on the roof has begun and will continue into the fall. And owing to a mistake by a contractor, a rainstorm caused major leaks around the entrance, basically requiring all of the drywall to be removed. Now the staff has been quite creative in decorating the exposed concrete blocks, and if you're out there, check it out. The HVAC is basically, the main HVAC is awaiting the arrival of a 70-ton chiller. It's a big commercial chiller. It's not something that you can get off the shelf. And right now, the date that we've been promised for that is sometime in the late winter, spring, early spring of 2024. So once that arrives, the HVAC system will be in much better shape. And in the meantime, also, another HVAC unit failed. And failed last week, and the replacement part has got a 4-week back order. So the staff is managing right now with fans and dehumidifiers, and thankfully the weather has cooperated so far. Please keep your fingers crossed for cooperating weather in the future. And then moving on, the board discussed the process to be followed if a book is challenged. The library does have a collections policy that matches that of Chester County library system, and this is just basically what are the steps that we take if someone were to challenge a book. Adult, teen, and children programming and attendance continues to grow, as does circulation. And we believe that attendance is also up, but because the door counter failed when the drywall had to be removed, we don't actually have actual counts for there's a gap. And there's a number of regular fall programs scheduled. So the library is also starting a program with the Wayne Senior Center for one-on-one tech support for 55 plus adults. And please check the website for details. And the board also made some minor amendments to the unattended children policy. So the Library Foundation is still looking for golfers for its Golf Classic on Monday, October 2nd. So if you golf or know anyone who golfs and hasn't signed up, please have them sign up. And the next meeting of the board is on September 28th at 7:30 p.m. at the Stratford Library. And then moving on to I'm also the liaison to the Traffic Committee, which meets once a quarter. The next meeting will be at 7:30 in the morning on Wednesday, September 20th, right here in Keene Hall. Thank you, Dr. Gussie.
Thank you. All right, now we will move on to the motion to authorize staff to advertise and receive bids for the Krabby Creek Stormwater Infiltration Trench Project. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Gussie and members of the board, this particular motion is just to let the staff work with advertising and receiving bids. The Krabby Creek Stormwater Project is one that is a partnership between the Township and the Valley Creek Restoration Partnership. They've obtained grant funding to do a series of underground infiltration trenches, similar to what we've done in a number of the other township roadways, right-of-ways in Krabby Creek. The current project is looking at Beechwood Road and Williams Lane, as well as one on Laurel Lane. They have received funding. They're currently working to finalize the construction documents and bid package, and we would expect with this approval to be able to advertise later this fall for that project. They are they are waiting currently for one more grant decision from a third-party agency that they're waiting to hear from this September.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comments or questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-20 to authorize the Township Engineer to execute a reimbursement agreement with PennDOT for the Howellville Road Bridge project. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Gussie and members of the board, this is hopefully one of the final stages of this project. This retro reimbursement agreement was put together with PennDOT, and basically with the board's authorization tonight, we will execute that agreement, upload it to their electronic system, and hopefully get the wheels moving so we can get back what's going to be about $2.95+ million in monies that the township has already expended for the project from PennDOT.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment?
I can't resist a comment here. You knew that. I mean, you knew it. You said this started in 2016. I'm saying 2014. I remember sitting in here with you and others and talking about this very project. And this is a case of perseverance all the way, because the Howellville Bridge was done and finished only because Steve and other members of staff and, consultants and other folks did what they had to do here to help get it done. And not only that, Steve and staff were able to get a retro reimbursement agreement with PennDOT. And yes, it takes years when you work with them, but we're going to get about $3 million back when this is all said and done for this project, and thanks to them and thanks to their good work. So, Steve, thank you, and thanks to everybody on staff, because I know that this was a team project. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
I'm just going to add 2 sentences here to also thank Steve and staff for their perseverance, and to really point out to the residents that this is the kind of thing that the staff does for you to keep your taxes low by going and getting these kind of reimbursements. And this was a project. I mean, this was a big thing to get this money back. So I don't know how to express to you that, except it took a lot for these guys to pull it off. So they should be really happy for them. So thanks, guys.
All right, any other board comments? Any public comments? All right, this one's a roll call vote. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next, we have a motion to approve escrow release request 3 for Sweetsford Road Apartments LLC, Echo Sweetsford, in the amount of $908,542.97. Balance remaining $1,197,256.16. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Chair and members of the board, the following release request is for the Echo apartment development that is going on at the intersection of Sweetsford and Contention. This release includes a variety of improvements that have been completed, including some of their stormwater rain gardens that they've been doing, as well as some of the site improvements. It has been inspected by our team from Princeton Hydro, and they are recommending release in the amounts that are listed tonight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comments? Any public comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve proposal from Tech Synergy LLC for server room upgrades. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. members of the board. The memo before you tonight was reviewed by the Finance Committee. It's coming from the IT department. It was recommended by the Finance Committee. Part of the expansion and renovation of the the Public Works garage, we need additional network switches and cabling with larger capacity. As part of that, we will need to do some upgrades. This is within our 2023 budget in the amount of $11,246.50. So we're asking for your approval to authorize that tonight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comments?
Yes, Dr. Gussie. All I'll say is that I exchanged email with Mr. Genestante about the work. It's reasonable. The prices seem reasonable, so I'm going to vote for it.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Any public comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to ratify emergency repair at Church Road Pump Station. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a follow-up to a memo from July 12th from Mr. Fitzgerald, the Public Works Director, in reference to the Church Road Pump Station Upgrade Project. While they were in there, they found a crack at the top of the riser in the wet well, so we needed to repair that. We looked at repair. It wasn't going to be feasible, so we were able to replace the riser ring in the amount of $27,660, which will be coming out of the sewer fund as part of that project. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thanks. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comments? Any public comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve capital purchase of inflow cutter for Church Road Pump Station. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, this is also related to the Church Road Pump Station upgrade. As part of the project, the inflow cutter was removed as part of its normal working life. And since it needs to be replaced and we're still within budget of the current project, we're requesting that part of this to replace that with the upgrades. The amount to do this work will come in at $25,950. It is still within the contracted price of the project. So we're requesting your authorization to make that replacement at this time.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any board comment? Supervisor Humble, do you have a comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Any public comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-21, amending Resolution 2023-14, correcting the address of the applicant for a liquor license transfer. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Dr. Gussie. This may seem familiar to the board as you took action on approving this liquor license transfer recently in May of this year. The applicant had provided the address for the restaurant as 821 Lancaster Avenue in Devon, which you approved. That is the address of the property. Upon making application or finalizing application with PLCB, the state has a slightly different address for the property, and we actually did confirm there's like 2 or 3 different ways that the property is referred to. And so PLCB and the applicant have asked that we correct it to 821 West Lancaster Avenue in Wayne from 821 Lancaster Avenue in Devon. Nothing else changes. It's just correcting it for the sake of PLCB to have the correct resolution from the board.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, this one's a roll call vote. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki. Aye. Supervisor Freed. Aye. Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next, we have a motion to approve the settlement agreement between BPC Realty LLC and the Tredyffrin Township Board of Supervisors and the Tredyffrin Township Zoning Hearing Board. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Dr. Gussie. This was a zoning hearing application for the property at 49 East Lancaster Avenue. You may recall that there's a Dunkin' Donuts there now with a drive-through, and there's another vacant unit on the property, which coincidentally used to be a bank back in the day. However, it is now zoned TCD, and that use was not permitted. The applicant filed for zoning relief for a use variance to permit the bank use itself, but with a drive-up ATM as well as a variance for parking reduction. The parking reduction was determined to be essentially compliant with parking and so therefore not required, but the use variance was denied. My understanding was that the concern, principally from the zoning hearing board, was having the Dunkin' Donuts drive up and drive through with the drive up ATM, essentially one lane for the Dunkin' and one lane for the ATM, and there being traffic concerns associated with that. The zoning hearing board, the applicant and the township have proposed an agreement whereby the applicant will remove the ATM use from the property. There will be no drive-up ATM. That will be only allowed to have a walk-up ATM installed at the property and not located in the drive-through lanes so that there's no traffic concern. So we're asking if the board is inclined to approve the agreement that is in front of you this evening to resolve that appeal.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise a public hearing on September 18th, 2023 to consider and possibly adopt ordinance HR 472 to authorize an addendum to lease agreement between the Township and Cradle of Liberty Council, Boy Scouts of America, for a portion of the property located at 1485 Valley Forge Road. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yeah, this is just the motion to authorize for a public hearing at our next meeting. And those for people who don't know, in the past we have purchased and acquired the property 1485. Berwyn Fire Company has been operating a substation out of there, and during that time the Cradle Liberty Council has remained in a portion of the building. They have been looking for space but have asked if they could extend their lease 1 year. We are amenable to that with an additional rent increase, and so we hope to have the public hearing to approve that by ordinance at our next meeting. So happy to answer any questions as needed.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise a public hearing on October 10th, 2023 to consider and possibly adopt ordinance HR 473 to authorize an addendum to the zoning ordinance definition of height of building. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This was brought to us by a petition from an applicant. The applicant's attorney is here. The zoning ordinance has a different definition for height of building than in the Uniform Building Code. We did discuss this in the ordinance subcommittee, and we felt that it was best to keep those two ordinances similar or the same, so we're looking to modify the zoning ordinance to meet the building code. The building code is issued through the state, so it would be quite a process to change that one. So we're recommending the public hearing.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to support the demolition of the 15 Bridge Avenue property, UPI 552L73 in Easttown Township, and release $300,000 from apparatus restriction for the larger Berwyn Fire Company project in order to facilitate needed line relocations to the adjacent and existing cell tower without charge by communications providers to the fire company. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just again, some real quick brief background is this is tied directly to the 23 Bridge Avenue Fire Station project in Easttown with Berwyn Fire Company. The Tredyffrin Easttown Joint Fire EMS Subcommittee Working Group had discussed with Berwyn Fire Company how to work with them on getting this portion of the project completed now, because wireless companies have been very gracious in working with Berwyn in terms of giving them in-kind services to get these lines moved in anticipation of the project. We don't want to hold that up and tie it up to getting this part completed. So one of the recommendations was to allow them to release the funding that the township had given related to apparatus to allow it to be used for this portion of the project, and that's what that item is for you tonight. I believe Easttown, at their meeting last week, had already approved this. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion?
I assume BFC approves of this?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Any public comments or questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, and now we will move to the last item, which is a fire study discussion. As everyone knows, our most recent meeting was a joint meeting with Easttown Township for our Phase 2 Fire EMS Consultant Study. And so for tonight, we thought we would just include the opportunity for the board to briefly share our reactions to this study. We're also currently working diligently in our subgroup with Easttown, and we'll be working with the fire companies to figure out our next steps. And we'll have more formal discussions in future meetings with ample opportunity for the public to weigh in. So for tonight, I'm happy to kick things off. To me, the major take-homes from our study were that despite the fact that the fire companies that serve us provide excellent services with the limited resources they have, we do have current gaps in our fire EMS system. The major ones that I feel we need to fill in the near term are the following. First, with the current staffing levels, we don't currently have guaranteed staffing of an ambulance 24/7, 365 at the 3 stations in Tredyffrin Easttown. So that's Paoli Fire Station, Berwyn Fire Station on Bridge Avenue, and the station on Valley Forge Road. And having an ambulance that's functioning full-time out of those 3 stations is really important to ensure response times for emergency medical situations where that coverage is really crucial to save lives. So I think that's one of the major issues that I saw come out of the study. The second one, we learned that a fire engine requires a minimum of 4 people because 2 firefighters have to be outside in order for 2 firefighters to make entry into a fire to even go in, and that's to meet multiple safety standards. And currently, we don't have the staffing for a fire engine at any of our 3 stations. Essentially, we're relying on volunteers to get those engines out, and sometimes the fire engines are going out without the minimum of 4 people. So I think this is a second major gap to staff a fire engine at one of the stations in TE. And I think that filling this gap is only going to become more urgent as volunteers continue to decline, and we're going to need to rely more on career staff. And then the third comment I'd like to make is, actually I think Supervisor Wasey from Easttown, who's here tonight, described it really nicely, that as the amount of money that we're going to need to provide to support fire EMS is going to need to go up, that will have to come with more oversight than our current structure allows for. So setting up a more formal relationship with Easttown to oversee our fire EMS and make sure that we're optimally serving our TE residents, in my mind, is very important. Personally, I don't envision, at least in the near term, looking at a massive department with multiple administrative employees, but I definitely see the value of creating a structure and framework for oversight. So those are the 3 major gaps that I see initially, and I look forward to working with Easttown and the fire companies over the next several months and in the long term to develop a plan to tackle these gaps and possibly other gaps that others have identified. So I'll end my thoughts with that, and any other supervisors can chime in with their reactions and thoughts.
I thought the presentation was eye-opening to some degree. I know that the fire companies have been woefully underfunded for as long as I've been on this board and have always argued for their additional funding. We've got a real problem when Tredyffrin and Easttown, two of the richest townships in Chester County, can't fund some fire companies. And it's a real reflection and how long we've taken to address this issue. But I'm glad we're doing it now. We spent a lot of money on this consultant to advise us of the significant costs that are ahead of us on capital, salaries, and the need that's out there. So I'm looking forward to moving quickly in finding funding to meet the needs that our townships have. I do have a nagging question out there. What standard are we using to determine the correct amount of resources? That is, our consultant used this NFPA 1710 standard, and I'm also hearing that that's not what we should be following. I don't know what exact standard we should be following. I want to hear more from our fire companies about what they want us to be following. I was also a little disappointed, maybe it wasn't in the concept of the consultant's plan, but I would have liked to heard a little bit more about possible regionalization program, seeing how we can get possibly Malvern, Paoli, BFC, maybe others to look at more of a comprehensive solution. That probably wasn't part of the consultant's package, but it's certainly something our entire county needs to be looking at more. So those are just some of my brief views on the presentation that was provided, and I look forward to working more.
Thank you. Any other supervisors?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. I mean, he talked about 4 topics: staffing, equipment, fire station locations, and effectiveness. And he gave us a pretty broad vision for a TE fire company with a lot of structure to it. And he really identified 2 interrelated problems: the declining in volunteers and the resulting funding shortfall, because you got to pay for staff to fill in. What he, I think, failed us on is he didn't really explain what the decline in volunteers and the staffing, the funding shortfall is doing to service delivery. He really didn't talk about that. And that sort of maybe a little bit to Matt's point about what is the service standard we're talking to. Since that meeting, I've had a lot of, I would say, spirited conversations with residents about how is this impacting service level and how do we feel it as residents, what's happening out there. And he did, I mean, our consultant did characterize the performance of our fire companies as very good, and I would say that's true. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But just by background, in 1975, there were 360,000 volunteer firefighters in the state of Pennsylvania, and in 2022, there were 30,000. That's just a fact. Countrywide, the number of volunteer fire companies in the United States peaked in 1988 at 23,300. And it declined to 19,000 volunteer fire companies in the U.S. by 2019. Pennsylvania similarly went from 2,400 to 2,000. So this is a real problem that's happening everywhere. It's not special to us by any means. And the question I've been wrestling with is how do we explain that it is impacting service levels, since we don't really feel it? I mean, you guys are doing a great job of the service you provide to the residents. And so we get a monthly report from both fire companies. And if you look at it, what you'll see is that between 15 and 45% of the time, when you call 911 and the fire truck arrives at your house, they don't have the right number of right people on that truck to fight your fire. That's something probably you just didn't realize, but between 15 and 45% of the time, the right people aren't able to show up. And that's not because they don't want the right people to be there. There's not available. And then the question I get back from residents is, well, how is that impacting service? Well, the fact that it still works because of professionalism, the training, and the dedication to serving our residents on behalf of the fire companies. There's a whole mutual aid thing. There's a lot of other stuff that's going on behind the scenes to make this work. But the other thing is luck. A lot of the calls are false alarms. I smell gas. It's a mulch fire. It's a lot of minor things that 2 people on a truck or less than what you really want can service. So like the 1710 is the number of people you need for a dwelling fire. But we don't have that many dwelling fires. I mean, it just isn't what we have today. Bob outlined this ABCD structure, which is and presented some numbers which are pretty extraordinarily expensive. I think, Tom, you correctly identified that we're not even at D. We're not even on the charts yet. And a lot of his Bob's recommendations, or the consultant recommendations, were pretty over the top in terms of what we could do today. And there have been proposed over time a lot of relatively inexpensive fixes on the part of the township, the fire companies. One small fix, and I don't know if it was a great idea or not, but it's just to give residents some ideas, is Berwyn wanted to spend for $210,000, we could take all their part-timers, make them full-time, and get like 30% more efficiency or hours out of that differently structured group of people. That's like a 2% tax increase. That's like $12 per resident per year, just to give you. So when Bob presents $28 million in expenses, like there are cheaper things we can do that could make a very big difference. Obviously, there's lots of other stuff that has to be done. There's other requests from, Paoli Fire Company and from Berwyn's. I'm not saying that's like the whole thing. That's one little example of the kind of things we can do to increment ourselves into better service. And the point I think I came away from this with is the whole ABC structure that Bob outlined, while it's interesting and helpful to think about as a framework. I think listening to what our fire companies have to say and getting their feedback on what we can actually implement effectively is pretty important. And more executable, potentially. Bob's idea that we're going to build our own fire company is super expensive and really difficult to execute in any kind of reasonable time frame. With respect to facilities, I heard pretty loud and clear our current stations, and I don't support our needs. We need more and better overnight facilities for both men and women, especially if we're going to have full-time staff in these centers, in these facilities. And we don't have red, yellow, green separation in either Paoli's fire station or Berwyn's Bridge Avenue station to keep our firefighters safe. And Bridge Avenue is old and decrepit at this point, unfortunately. So, I heard loud and clear we need to replace the Bridge Avenue facility, and we need to look at addressing the shortfalls in the other facilities pretty quickly. I think Valley Forge seems like it's okay for now. With respect to equipment, I don't see why we want to spend a lot of money on equipment except replacing things that are worn out and aging and obsolete, or already on order, obviously, until we have the right number of firefighters and EMTs to put on this equipment. And then the TE Fire Company structure, our current fire companies have protected our community for a very, 100 years plus, right? There isn't anything broken with either of them except their finances due to declining volunteerism. And it seems like the most judicious use of resident money is to potentially increase our monetary support with some oversight to the current fire company structures. And we, as boards, and us and Easttown, routinely allocate, $1 million contracts to subcontractors for infrastructure stuff. And I don't know why we can't spend money on our fire companies and trust them to do it effectively. So that's what I heard from the meeting. That's the only idea I came away with really excited about was the 3-platoon system, which seems to make sense from a cost effectiveness perspective. But anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Any other supervisors?
Chair Gussie, just a really simple idea, or not idea, concept that came out of the study was, listen, you know what? You don't have as many volunteers now. We don't have as many volunteers now. We're understaffed. These folks can't do their job at the level that they should be able to. They do a really, really good job for us, but you've got to help them out. You've got to help. How do you help them out? You help them out with funding. And then the question becomes, do we as townships have any control over that funding and how we're working with our fire companies? Maybe we do as those numbers go up and we work cooperatively with the fire companies to make this work. So we have paid career firefighters cross-trained with EMS, and we can fill the voids, as Chair Gussie said, or the gaps, and we can do that moving forward. And the gaps that we can fill are, and she mentioned the key that hit me, 24/7 ambulance coverage at our 3 stations. We can do that. We can't do it now, not because our firefighter cross-trained EMS folks don't want to do it. They want to do it. They would love to do it. They just can't do it. There's just not enough people to do it now. It's a real kind of simple thing. It costs money, and we have to make that happen and work with them in the right fiscally responsible, prudent way going forward. And we can do that. We've worked with them in different times before. It's just that the parameters had to change. And his last comment, and I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out. This will become a point of contention, but the last comment that's Supervisor Miller, he threw out the three platoon system. I don't know. I'm not a firefighter. We need to talk with the fire companies about that. How? Because if we're coming with the money, how is that going to affect our delivery of those funds? How will it be efficient? Will it be much better than save taxpayer funds yet provide the taxpayer public safety moving forward? Will it have a deleterious effect on that? If not, why not? Let's look at it. And as far as, sort of working together with the fire companies, I actually see, I may be a bit Pollyannish here, but I could see Township working well with the fire companies. We bringing the funding, which is real because we're going to have to do it. And managing the funding and working with the funding and working with personnel and equipment and vehicles and everything that goes into firefighting and public safety and saving lives, so that you folks, and it's been said here before by others, and now I'll say it, firefighters and EMS personnel want to fight fires and save lives, not crunch numbers, not sit behind a desk. Well, we being in some form or format of organization between the two townships and working with the fire companies, we can fill that role. And it doesn't have to be a contentious fighting role over dollars and cents and how it's being spent and who's doing what when. We can bridge that gap. And the term regionalization was mentioned here before by my friend Supervisor Holt. That may be a dream going forward, but we could have I don't want to use the term regionalization, we could have our group here work well together because we've sat in the same rooms and we've fought and we've agreed and we've disagreed and we came back into the room and we kept on working. And that's what we have to do now as I see it. And we've made a heck of a lot of progress. As far as the study is concerned, great. Thank you, Dr. Bob. You give me 4, 5, 6 options. Let's look at the money. Let's look at the personnel. Let's look at the facilities. But now let's go back and let's think about doing what we can do in the shortest term. He said he referred to some numbers that were astronomical to me going forward. To me, I've shut down when I heard those numbers. But I know that we can make progress here in the near term, focusing on 24/7, 365 ambulance coverage for our 3 stations. 4, and that's we might have to work a little bit harder on the 4 firefighters for a fire truck, one fire truck, think about this, available at all times. That might be more difficult. But what I would not want to see is us look at the study and just be so overwhelmed with numbers that we were never going to follow. We were never going to use those numbers. They may or may not be realistic way down the line. We have to do what we have to do today. We do have to plan for the future. but we have to be cognizant of what real funding can be. So that's how I feel.
Any other board comments?
Just one more comment is this idea of this model that's going to come out of these, why we need more control of the funds, but the fire companies are underfunded, but we're going to handle the management more through the township to let the firefighters do their job. I don't know, does that model exist out there? If so, that's great. Let's work through it. But it's, to me, I've only seen, you have fire companies that are hired by the municipality and that's taken care of all in-house. And then you have townships that fund the fire companies and they go off and manage their funds and do it that way. So it sounds like we're proposing some type of third way here. I don't know. But I'm willing to listen.
Any other boards, supervisors want to speak? All right, do we have any public comments?
Good evening. Thank you for the time. I appreciate the board's work on this. I appreciate everyone's comments. It's come up a couple times that we've heard the service delivery question. Berwyn Fire Company, as most of you probably realize, we've been providing to you a service delivery report for 6+ years. That is not aiming for NFPA 1710 by any stretch. That is a minimum service delivery standard that we've identified. Chief Brazunas before me came up with that standard. We've been reporting on it ever since. And as you guys realize, it does demonstrate that there are performance gaps in there, and that's something we're talking about. We are happy to have the dialogue and define a different level of service delivery. If that's a discussion you want to have, I think we've advocated for that discussion for quite a while now. Happy to have it. But data-driven decisions are where we want to get to with this. I mean, we want it to make sense for the townships, for the community, and for the fire company. I think I mentioned that our service delivery reporting today is a minimum standard. Minimum is literally one step above failing. And if I'm telling you that we're failing, or that we're unable to meet that minimum on quite a few occasions monthly, then we're failing. And I think that the citizens and the community and everybody expect and deserve better than a failing level of service delivery. The only way we're going to solve that is with additional career staff. The volunteers are stretched as thin as we can be. They're doing a tremendous amount of work. But it is what it is, and there's a finite level of activity that we're going to get from those volunteers. So we need to supplement it with additional career staff, and that is going to be something that Tredyffrin and Easttown are going to have to figure out with us how we find those dollars. We need it immediately, though. We've been having the same conversation for. Well, I've been doing this for 32 years, 33 years now at this point, and to some degree, I've been having the same conversation for 33 years. But more recently, with the current group, at least for 4 or 6 years, we've been having this conversation, and I acknowledge it has produced. You have increased your funding, and that has enabled us to increase our staffing level, but there still needs to be more.
How much has the funding been increased over the last 10 years?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
200%, 300%, somewhere in there? Okay.
I mean, we've done this before. Is there a point behind that? I acknowledge that the funding has gone up.
You said it's been increased. I thought you had the number. I'm not sure I understand.
I don't know why I had to come prepared with that specific data point. If you're trying to make a point, we acknowledge that the funding has gone up.
I don't know why you're being defensive. I asked a question about.
Maybe it's the history of your comments.
Again, I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Okay,
but
we can chat about it here. We can chat about it offline.
I just asked a simple question. If you know how much we'd increase your funding, if that's not something you want to answer.
I didn't say I didn't want to answer it. I said I don't have that number at my fingertips. Do you? If you have the number and you want to share it, I'll assume that it's correct.
If I had the number, I wouldn't have asked you the question. You said we've increased the funding. I thought you knew what it was. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure why you're reacting that way. I expect more. I really expect more from our public service.
I expect. Okay, that's fine. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Now, I was really going to try and avoid this because I guess I have a little bit different take on some of this. I think we're trying to come up with a solution, and I'm not really sure, and this was sort of the nature of my comments previously, we need to first identify what the problem is. I'm not sure we've identified the problem. I think we've talked about the lack of volunteerism. I think that's true. I think that's true across the Commonwealth. I think that's probably true across the country. That's clearly having an impact on our fire company's ability to do their job. I will say, though, that one of my concerns with the approach we're looking at is in looking at fire companies around the region, I'm not seeing the same impacts from the volunteerism in other places that we're necessarily seeing in, I won't even say all of our fire companies, because I think each of our fire companies has to be looked at differently and separately. And I'm not sure that both of our fire companies are suffering or would say that they're suffering in the same way as one another. So I would ask that I do think there needs to be solutions. I think, I'm not really sure how the perception now has become that there's not a support. I don't even know where that perception comes from, but what perceptions are what they are. My concern is that we have to identify the issues. I don't know that all our fire companies are struggling to the same extent, and I think we have to understand why. And we need to understand why they're struggling individually, why some are struggling in this region, even in the TE area, differently than they're struggling elsewhere, so we can come up with a solution. And until we're able to identify the problem, I'm not sure we can really come up with a solution.
I mean, I would say that I'm viewing this more as service delivery of Tredyffrin and Easttown. And I think we have identified, independent of who's doing the service, we don't have 24/7, 365 guaranteed staffing of an ambulance at all three of our stations. We don't have any guaranteed fire engine in any three of our stations. So I think, viewing it more of, we want to make sure we have the best service for our residents, and we need to make sure that there's the staffing to support that, and it's placed in the right places, the right locations to serve our residents. So that's how I'm kind of viewing it, as those are the problems that
I just want to be sure that we're not allowing the tail to wag the dog, and we tend to hear from one of our fire companies, and in trying to address their problem, I want to be sure that we're not viewing the issue more broadly than it really is. If it's one fire company that's got an issue, let's look at the one fire company that's got an issue, and let's try and identify why they have the issue. If it's all our fire companies that have an issue, then we need to look at all our fire companies and identify what the issue is. I just think we're making a lot of assumptions, and I've asked this question before. I'm not sure we're really backing up. I think when I asked the question when Dr. Bob was here is what really basically trying to get at what is the problem. The response was, well, that's not what I was tasked with. I was given something I was asked to do, and I did it. And I don't think you can start with the solution again until you have identified.
I think phase one was defining the problem and phase 2 was the solution. So the phase 1 back in the spring was his presentation of the problem, where he described volunteerism going down. And
Can I ask a question? So, Mark, when I tell you that there were 360,000 volunteers in 1975 and there are 30,000 today in the state of Pennsylvania, do you think that's bullshit? Like, do you think I made that up?
My question is, why are we not, if that's true,
If it's true, okay, go ahead, keep going.
why are we not seeing all the fire companies in the Commonwealth facing the same
There's
problem?
400 fewer fire companies.
Why are we not seeing all the fire companies in the Commonwealth facing the same problem? Why are we not seeing all of the fire companies in the Commonwealth facing the same problem? You asked me a question.
Yeah,
you said volunteer.
I'm answering. I think we are.
You said,
Have you
but
read
you're
the House
not.
Representative Pennsylvania House report? I mean,
I go to municipalities throughout the region, and I talk to the fire companies throughout the region. I am not seeing this kind of problem across the region. I'm not seeing it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm not seeing it, and I'm not hearing even in our own. I'm not even hearing in our own township other fire companies having the same problems that you're having. I'm not. Absolutely.
I'm not going to speak for the other fire companies. They're here, they can speak for themselves what problems they're facing. I've heard what they've said before about the problems they're facing. In terms of throughout the Commonwealth, everybody is saying it. There's an SR6 report from 5 years ago at this point that identified the problems. Nothing has been fixed or done to solve it. Everybody is facing the same problems. I don't know who you're talking to, but you're being grossly misinformed. In terms of specific to this area, I mean, it's kind of a futile exercise. I mean, honestly, I mean, even if a nearby fire company isn't having a volunteerism problem, what are we going to do? Are we going to pick that fire company up and bring them here? Or are we going to move the township over there so they can be serviced by that other fire company? But either way, there are some big differences. Okay, the cost of home ownership and living in Tredyffrin Township and Easttown Township is significantly challenging. We have members all the time, active members all the time, who cannot afford to live here, who move away. Okay, another problem, it's a real friction point attracting new volunteers or keeping volunteers when our firehouse is literally falling down. It's literally a health hazard. That's a real problem. That's a real obstacle keeping volunteers. Third point. There's been, I think the state legislature allowed municipalities to give volunteer tax relief on tax bills. Multiple other municipalities, some local, are doing that for their volunteers. We've asked for a year and a half, 2 years now, probably greater than 2 years at this point. We've discussed it. We've brought it up. We've said, hey, this will help us. It's probably not going to help us attract anybody, but it's certainly going to help us keep people. It's going to solve part of the affordability problem.
You're talking about the tax relief, the local tax relief?
Yes, it's a real estate tax credit.
Well, I think the finance director's not here. Didn't he address that the last time, that said we're giving a stipend?
He said we're talking about it, we're looking at it.
Yeah,
we still don't have anything. I mean, everybody on the board knows that. I mean, there is no stipend, there is no tax credit. There's nothing.
Well, I've talked about the tax credit. I was the one who brought it up.
yeah, this is something that we are researching.
And I'm sure you're also aware now that the statute's been amended, right? You're aware of the amendments that allow it, the counties and the school district?
Yeah, and the county's looking at it. The county's actively in the process of implementing it. They've gathered the data from all of the county fire departments, because the county recognizes that there's a countywide problem. It's not just a Berwyn problem.
Okay, so
the county's identified that and said that this is the way to solve it.
So is it I just want to make sure I understood one thing that you said. You're saying that throughout the Commonwealth, all the other fire companies are in the same financial distress that Berwyn's in?
I did not say that. And
okay, are there any other fire companies in this region that you can identify that are in the same financial distress that Berwyn's in?
How would I know that off the top of my head? I said they are in the same.
You said everybody's having the same. I said I'm talking to other people and I'm not seeing the same problem. You're telling me I'm misinformed.
Volunteerism was what I was talking about. That was what you were talking about.
No, it's
also.
not. I started out by saying I understand that volunteerism is stress for everyone.
Okay.
I started out by saying, I started out by saying, I understand that volunteerism is down. I understand that volunteerism is a problem for everyone. But I am not seeing the financial problems, the requests that need to give, 300, 400, 500% increases in the amount of money we're giving. I am not seeing that in other places. I'm not even seeing that from everyone in this place. That was my point. Is that clear enough?
All right, I'm gonna cut this off now. I don't think it's beneficial to be having this debate. All right, why don't we allow other people to come up?
The structure of the fire departments in this township have always struck me as odd. You have 3 legacy companies. Every legacy company is trying to do the full service. You have volunteer problems. Is anyone looking at the idea that these are the volunteer staffing the departments can handle, the companies can handle, and then take other functions away from them to a central facility, like the ambulatory response? We're not that huge a township. Why can't you have a centralized professional ambulatory response professional teams, and relieve the fire companies of that staffing responsibility and the expenses? It would make a lot more sense, be a lot cheaper in the long run, and it would let the fire companies concentrate on where they can get people to do the jobs instead of stretching them. Other companies in other areas have done this kind of thing. They split it off, where the professionals do a better job and you can consolidate. But you're stretching the volunteers to the point. 30 years ago, the firefighters covered this much. Now they're asked to do this much. They come out to every accident. They go all these services. They didn't used to do that. You've got to get the workload down where the volunteers can handle it, and then you need to figure out what that is, take the rest out and put it under professional services. That'll work. It's outside the box. It'll work better.
Thank you.
You
Come on up.
have a virtual?
Oh, we can switch to virtual.
Good evening. Mike Baskin, Berwyn Fire Company EMS Captain. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I just wanted to say, unfortunately, I couldn't be there tonight, but I have been listening. Just 2 things. In respect to what was just stated about outsourcing to professional services, our fire and EMS people, both volunteers and our career staff, are professional. If you do not maintain the crossover staffing that we have now, you are going to double your staffing, and it will be more expensive. Although I know a lot of people feel that this is a small community, between the 3 fire companies, you're doing well over 5,000 EMS calls and another 1,300, 1,400 fire calls. We need to maintain what we have been doing. And in the long run, it will not be less expensive. Anybody else is going to come in to want to do this is going to be for profit. We are a nonprofit, and we are trying to maintain a balanced budget. And just in respect to some of the comments that were made earlier, some of the back and forth that happens between the municipalities and the fire company that are extremely negative in nature are actually a deterrent to volunteerism. It's just, myself, Chief Brundage, we don't make any money. Asking for more money from the municipalities does not put any money into our pockets. We are trying to provide a service that saves lives. It is not a charity, and it does cost money. And we have been working for many, many years to try to get that point across. I feel like we have been doing very well with our current ESOP group with Easttown and Tredyffrin, but we need to make sure that we stay on track take some of the lessons that we learned from the consultant and allow the fire company to do what we do best and to help guide the townships to providing the best service they can for their residents, which is really what our priority is. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, why don't we do an in-person?
I missed the original meeting due to work, so I apologize for repeating something here, but I live a block from the Paley Firehouse, and every time those sirens go off and the trucks roll, I pull out my Pulse Point app and my Chesco Incidents app, and it seems to me, not a scientific survey, but it seems to me a lot of calls go to the various and assorted drug rehab facilities in our township. And I don't know what the percentage is, but it seems very, very high. And my question becomes, are these for-profit organizations who are functioning as an aggregator of need pulling their weight in terms of paying for the services they're consuming? My only other point is with regard to volunteerism, it's a little bit of another non-scientific thing, but a very, very dear friend of mine ran with the Boalsburg Fire Department out in central Pennsylvania. And his observation was that those smaller towns throughout the state, people still tend to live and work in the town. So when the alarms go off, the mechanic puts down his tools and goes. The banker excuses himself and goes. In our area, so many of the people around us work in the city, they work west of here. They can't drop everything and drive 20 miles or 30 miles to answer a fire call. So that seems to me like why we're having more issues with volunteerism, whereas other places across the state can still function better on that system. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a very interesting discussion, but I think there's a problem. Dr. Gossi a few minutes ago said, and this is a very important question, very important point. It's probably her scientific background that did it, but it's very important. She said, I think we have to define the problem. It sounds pretty simple, and it is. It's where you start with everything. You define the problem. I did not attend the meeting on July 31st. However, I looked at the videotape, and believe it or not, I read the transcript. And I think that meeting really revealed the true problem. Supervisor Freed had a conversation with Dr. Andrews regarding the ideas that Dr. Andrews was presenting. Supervisor Freed stated that he was concerned with the quality and the level of service. Brilliant. I think it's really a very good idea. All you've been talking about, all Dr. Andrews talked about, was staffing and money. He presented a lovely presentation with lots of bright red and bright yellow fire trucks that would cause the heart of any red-blooded boy to go pounding all over the place. It was a really attractive presentation. The problem is, he himself said that for all of the numbers and what have you that he was presenting were not adequate to answer the question that needed to be asked. And I'm sure he said, in fact, he wasn't even quite sure what the question was, and he didn't know what the answer would be. And I was surprised because he said that his doctoral research was qualitative, not quantitative. Anybody who's concerned with quality should not have spent all of that time on numbers. What he should have asked, and I have a proposal, I made up a proposal, and I will present it to you. First of all, Mark Freed was concerned with the quality of service, level of service delivery. Dr. Andrews said, my degree is qualitative, not quantitative. There are questions that mathematics can answer, but they may not be the answers you need. You don't need to worry about how much it's costing. You don't need to worry about how many people you need, how many people have to be on a fire truck. Not yet. It's not that they're unimportant questions, but they're not the essential questions. The essential questions that you need to ask simply is, what is the problem, as Dr. Gossi just did? Define the problem, and then ask, how do we solve it? Once you know what the problem is, you're already psychiatrists, they like to say, once you recognize that you're sick, you now can find the cure. Okay, so let's think about the problem. The problem really is, and I think it came out in the conversation between Dr. Andrews and Supervisor Freed, that this problem is, what is high-quality service and a high level of delivery? What does that mean? Now, we have a couple of groups of people who have that answer. Those answers will be found in, number one, the fire department and emergency medical services. They have a concept of what high quality service and a high level of service delivery is. There are certain standards to which people have alluded, both, I think, supervisors, Dr. Andrews, and our representative from the fire community. There are certain regulations and rules, laws, and what have you, that they need to follow, that they need to meet. At the same time, we have citizens who don't need to meet those rules because that's not their business to meet them, but they have an idea of what it means to them. Now, there are two groups of citizens you need to talk to. One group of citizens are the people who have had reason to take advantage of the fire services and the emergency medical services. What did they find that was high quality? What needs work? What about the delivery? What is good delivery? What wasn't quite so good? Then you go to people who haven't had those services, who would be, of course, speaking hypothetically, but that's okay, because you never know what you're going to get in somebody's daydream. You might get a good idea. You have to listen. So you talk to three groups of people, two groups of citizens who've had the services, who have not had the services but know what they expect, and the people who deliver those services. Now, even in that group, there are two groups. There's management and staff. What does management see as meeting these standards? What does the staff see as meeting these standards? You simply need to do a simple survey. Let's make up some questions and distribute them to people and get back their replies. Then, once you have an idea of what people expect, then you design a fire and emergency medical services system that meets all of those requirements. And then you figure out, how much is it going to cost you to do that? And you're going to say, oh my God, this is incredibly expensive. The chance of winning a lottery to pay for it is 302 million to 1. It's not worth the $20 to buy a ticket, to buy the tickets. So let's figure out, we'll scale back. We'll figure out what we can afford in order to provide among those services, those concepts of high quality service and high level of delivery. What can we afford to provide? And then you write a plan to meet those requirements. Right now, as I see it, I see a lot of arguing about, what is it called, a turf war or something, where everybody wants to protect their own little area, and people don't want to give up things. You know, when companies merge, only one person can be the president of the company. What happens to the president of the other company? That's an argument, and it creates problems, and they got to solve it. And you've got the same problem here if you're thinking about a district, but maybe you don't need a district. And that's essentially not really the problem whether you have a district or not. You have to figure out what kind of services you have to provide and what level of delivery you need to provide. It's so simple. And you know what? I'm even going to say that I will volunteer time to help with it. I'll help you make up questions. I'll do whatever needs to be done. And I will charge you less than Dr. Andrews, because I don't have to make a living at this. I won't charge you anything, okay? It's important to do this. It's such a simple way to handle it, and you can do it without an argument, because you are finding out what people truly, really want, and you're demonstrating that you're working hard to give it to them. You're not deciding what they want. You're not telling them what they want, and you're not telling them what they need.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public? All right, come on up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Testa. I'm the fire chief at Paley Fire Company. I just want to make a few comments. Normally, I sit in the back and just kind of listen to everything and take everything in. But I just want to make it known that, Paley Fire Company, we're very thankful that you guys have done this study, no matter what comes out of this. Supervisor Freed, you had mentioned earlier that you're not sure if we all have the same problems. And you're right, we don't. Of the 3 fire companies, Radnor, Berwyn, Paley, we all are different. We have many different needs at different levels. However, there is one thing we all have in common, and that is wanting that sustainable funding. When a volunteer member joins the fire company, we ask them to go to Firefighting 1. That's almost 200 hours of training, just that. And that is the basic class. That is it. We ask them to come to weekly in-house trainings. Businesses ask for us to attend events on weekends, birthday parties, different municipal events, things like that. For example, this fall in September and October, we have something Friday night, Saturday, and Sundays for almost 2 months. This is the things that we should not be asking our volunteers to do. I shouldn't have to ask my volunteers to work a weekend to sell flowers just to make $3,000 so we can help pay our utility bills. That's not why they joined the fire company, right? So that sustainable funding is huge to us. And I know that you guys are looking at many different options, but something has to change. What we are doing today has worked because we've made it work. There's going to be a point where we're not going to be able to make it work anymore. So I appreciate all your consideration, and we look forward to hearing from you.
And I just want to say, I know you're usually more of an observer than speaking, but I do appreciate you speaking. I think it's important for us to get your perspective, and
absolutely.
And frankly, I think you gave a lot of specifics and useful information. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
I would like to make a comment, if I could, because I've heard, different things go on. It makes me think that there's still, how can there still be so much lack of knowledge about what the fire department needs and what they do? I mean, they do a great job. I mean, and you never know when you're going to have an accident or something and need the ambulance company, or if your house has a fire, or if your neighbor's house has a fire and it spreads to yours. I mean, all these things, they're not planned. They just happen. And, Mr. Kuhn, and I am kind of addressing your thought on ask people what their experience has been. The fire company has helped one of my neighbors on my street 3 times for fires. And, they were just accidents. Nobody planned it. And part of it was on the Chester Valley Trail, which outside of their fence, we live along the trail. And they responded through the trail. I mean, they got on there and got back there and put out the fire. And that's really amazing to me that they were able to do that Just in this past May, I can tell you the Berwyn Fire Company's ambulance came to our house because my husband had an accident at the house and had a severe bleeding accident. They sent the, I don't know how you guys transmit knowledge, that there's a call, but because we were very fortunate because one of the Berwyn Fire Company ambulance volunteers lives on our street, and our house happens to be the bus stop for the schools, and he was putting his daughter on the bus when the call came through, and he ran to our front door. I mean, like, right away, was there right away, and they were terrific. I mean, we don't know when we're gonna need their help. It comes up when you least expect it, really. One of my best friends in the township, their house nearly burned all the way down, while they're away at work. And they responded. And so when you talk about how many people are needed on the truck, to get the kind of quality we need, how many people have to die? 2 people show up on one truck, and that's not enough to fight the fire or save anybody who's inside the house. So how many die before we say, oh yeah, there is a reason why 2 is not enough? So, to me, that is a no-brainer that we should fund them to have enough people to ride the fire trucks and respond adequately to the fire calls. With Chair Gussie saying, well, what is the problem here? I guarantee you that is what everybody is looking at. Whether you're an accountant or a scientist or a lawyer, issue spotting, right? That's always the big deal. You got to know what you're there to fix. And I think the fire companies have done a really good job of showing us the weaknesses and what needs to be addressed. And I don't mean this all to you, I'm just saying because you had brought this up, I think they've done a really good job, and I'm grateful for the service that we have here. And when they talk about the Berwyn Fire Station, it is literally crumbling, and it has got dangerous environmental substances in it that make them sick. They can't continue to work from there. And does that shy away volunteers? I'm sure it does. So I know you're volunteering to help with the questionnaire, but they may need your help more on the business side, which is fundraising. That's what the business side of the fire company does, and they're all volunteers, and they set up fundraisers. The flower fundraiser that Paoli is doing, or the turkey raffle, or somebody else holds some kind of fundraiser that benefits the fire company. That is a way that a lot of people can help without having to be the actual volunteer firefighter. And I know the turkey raffle is fun, and you give away a lot of turkeys to people in the neighborhood who really could use it, but I think that's sad that Berwyn Fire Company has to sell turkeys by a raffle to try to meet funding gaps. We're one of the richest townships in this whole state, and our taxes are also amongst the lowest. And so I would like to see the county come through with something on whether it's a property tax relief on real estate taxes for volunteerism. I'd love to see something like that happen. I think, I'd run out and go help, lower my bill. I could give up lots of free time to help lower my bill. I think other people feel the same. So to me, supporting the fire company and what we need to do to bring them along, and I realize it probably has to happen in stages. We can't just start doing, whatever we want first. I support it. So I just want to say that, I think some of us are squabbling over things that we already know the answer to. We just don't want it to have to be the problem. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other comments?
Ray Clark from the Malvern section of the township. This is clearly so difficult, and I'm kind of struggling with really what to say, but I think the people have talked about articulating the problem that we're trying to solve are really on the right track. What is the problem that leads to the fact that we need an ambulance at all 3 stations 24/7, that each fire engine needs 4 people. Now that's like an articulation of a solution to what particular problem? That we are not able to fight fires when we get there. But then I heard Supervisor Miller say, well, there's mutual aid and most things can be dealt with 2 people. So at some point we get to a trade-off, right? What is the price that we're prepared to pay to deal with whatever the tail end of the distribution is, where 2 people aren't enough, and to get the next 2 people is another however many minutes from the mutual aid, and that's not enough. And that has not been articulated, I think, to the residents in ways that we can really understand and get our heads around. And I really appreciate Supervisor Free really trying to get at these questions. And it isn't just a question of like adding more money. We need to understand this whole question of service levels and what you need, what physically equipment you need. Clearly a problem is the Bridge Avenue station. Clearly that's not acceptable in anybody's world. We can say, okay, there's a problem, we have a plan to fix it, I think. Now, is the problem that we are having an unacceptable percentage of houses be consumed with fire, an unacceptable delay in people getting to Paoli Hospital? Let's articulate that in ways that really people can get their heads around. And I thought it was really helpful when Supervisor Gossi started off with articulating those solutions. That was much better than Professor Bob, or whatever his name was, extrapolating this line ad infinitum, when we find that calls, in fact, are now back at the same level they were in 2019, pre-COVID. And he lost me completely at that point. So I think, yeah. And I do have like one other question, really to do with Paoli and Willistown, which I think a third, or I'm not sure if it's Willistown or East Whiteland, but a third of your biz calls are outside of TE?
Correct.
And so surely we should be including the Willistown Township in this. Anyway, I don't envy you trying to address this. Thank you.
Ray, just to follow up on your comment, I mean, there's, to make, maybe to slice and dice it even a little bit more, when you're trying to identify what the problem is, a lot of what we're talking about is operational, and then you also touched on the capital, right, which is, the bridge, firehouse, this is all happening all at one time. A lot of it needs to be done, obviously. I think you're also aware that the township bought the property on Valley Forge Road, which, has a structure on it that it's not perfect, but it's bigger than Bridge. All these things go in, and that was attempted as part of a solution to the substation issue. So we're dealing both with the operational call time, manpower, person power issues, as well as the infrastructure capital issues. And it's all coming to a head at one time, and just the capital issues are multi-million-dollar issues. The operational issues are, I don't know how many zeros are on that, but it's all, they're all things that we have to understand what the problem is, why, not only why the struggle is, but what are we trying to, ultimately provide the service that needs to be provided. If I'm not sure, if I need to be the bad guy, that's fine. I have the greatest amount of respect for our fire companies. I really do. Maybe that's gotten lost somewhere in the fact that we've sparred somewhat over what the funding should be, how much, disagreeing about have we given money, have we not given money. Bottom line is, you guys are an integral part of the community. And you volunteer your time, whether you're on a salary or not. The reality is, and I will agree with this, I don't have a solution for it, but you're not getting paid enough. There's no question about that. But you guys do a service. You guys are public servants, and that's volunteerism in and of itself, whether you're pulling a salary or not, and that is appreciated. We can. I hope at a certain point. There have been times, I think, where one fire company's looked at me as a bad guy, another fire company's looked at me as a bad guy. I don't know why that happens, but the bottom line is, you guys, all of you, regardless of the fire companies, that goes for our police department and all the first responders, are an integral part. You're the guys, it's not lost on me that while I'm asleep at night at 2 o'clock in the morning, you guys are running out and running into burning buildings. I get it. What I'm trying to do is talk about what a good solution is. I really don't want it to be personal. For what it's worth, I'm not sure what the solution is. I think, I was on the fire committee for a number of years. I thought at one point we had a solution, at least on some of the infrastructure stuff, and I think that's back to the drawing board a little bit, although it's moving forward again. I think the biggest challenge, frankly, the infrastructure capital is less of a concern than trying to come up with a solution to the operational issues. I think that's a tough nut to crack. But it's one of those things where failure is not an option. We have to provide the services. We have an obligation to provide the services. You guys want to provide the services, and we want you to provide the services. So we just need to figure out a way to do it.
I have two comments. One is Ray, and anybody else out there. With respect to service delivery, what part of between 15 and 45% of the time when the truck shows up for the fire, they don't have the right people on it, doesn't make you think that's a problem? Like, how is that not a way to identify a fundamental, you called 911, you wanted a fire truck to come to your house because you had a problem. They did the best they could and they showed up, but they don't have the right people on that truck to solve your problem. Like,
and then 5 minutes later, 2 people come. Is that acceptable? I don't know.
I would argue pretty vehemently, no. We're endangering our firefighters and our residents. Like, they have a dangerous job. How many firefighters died? I think 66 firefighters died in the state of Pennsylvania in the past 10 years, 47 volunteers. I did a Google search on lawyers lying in the line of duty, 0. Actually, nothing comes up. But a little bit facetious, but they have a dangerous job. We're endangering residents. I think when I call 911 and ask for a fire department to come, I expect them I didn't even think about the fact that they would actually not show up able to solve the problem. I think that's what our residents would expect. And just let me say one more thing. Let me get one more thing first. And just to Mark, to the questions you keep asking about, you don't hear other fire companies with the story, the same story that where you're hearing from our local fire companies. Do a Google search on volunteer fire companies under stress in PA. There are pages and pages of the exact story that Andrea just told. I sent you one already. There's plenty on there. It's all the same story. Yeah, so anyway, there's plenty of stories out there. But I guess do we have to wait till someone, I guess it's a risk management question, right? How much risk do you want to take having these trucks show up not able to solve the problem? And I think this is, I would be pretty biased towards not taking that risk since we don't really have to.
Is it a new risk now?
Is it a new risk now?
So sorry. You pointed out the solutions that I kind of started with, and I apologize if I didn't make clear what the problems are, but the first one of needing an ambulance at the 3 stations. We did an analysis when we decided to open a substation that it was really focused on ambulance, that you need to have good response times. And we have heat maps showing the distance to make sure when a call comes in, a truck can get there fast enough to save someone's life for a heart attack, something like that. And I think it's like 4 or 5 minutes. You need to get there or that person dies. And so that, you know, we opened that station really with that focus for EMS. And so staffing, you know, a minimum 1 ambulance each station, so you have the 3 areas covered. I feel like that is, you know, a need that we have already established, frankly. That's why we started that station. And then the second one that I mentioned, which is having 4 people on a truck. So David mentioned sometimes we've learned that sometimes a truck shows up to an event and they don't have 4 people, and maybe it's a false alarm, few. Or maybe it's a spill of something and 2 people can do it. But if it's a fire, they actually are not even supposed to go inside until 4 people are there. And so they have to wait there for another truck to come. And yes, there's, you know, this whole system in place, so Radnor might come, Paoli might come, you know, they'll all fill in, but they are not supposed to enter that fire or even start until they have 4 people. So I feel that in Tredyffrin Easttown, we should have at least 1 truck that can go to a fire and have enough people to actually enter the fire. And that's because you need a buddy to go inside, buddy system, safety. And you need to have 2 people outside. So I'm reading this, so I'm cheating a little bit, but so that they can monitor the, you know, what's going on, and they can rescue the firefighters in need. So those are the problems that I feel, you know, basic problems. To me, that's the minimum level of service because you have the level of service, but then you have to staff that. So the minimum level of staffing that I feel like we should aspire to in the short, long term. I mean, I don't know, that's still a big jump from where we're at, but that's where I see as a goal, and those are the problems that I feel need to be solved.
So I'd like to jump in. I know that I'm standing between people in bedtime, but so I think part of what we're talking about, and this goes back to the question raised by Mr. Clark, you know, maybe 99% of the time a second truck shows up with the 2 additional people. But what we're talking about is, you know, if you think about it from a statistical point of view, are we talking about staffing for a 3 sigma over the medium? Are we talking about staffing for 5 sigma, 6 sigma? We're talking about statistically trying to, what is the level of staffing for the tail end of the distribution? And for that, there is no real scientific answer. And so that's why we rely on, you know, there are national standards. We don't have a large enough statistical sample out here to come up with a statistically meaningful answer for Tredyffrin Township or even Chester County. And that's why we have the national standards that we try and meet. And when a national standard says we should have, for this level of population, for this type of township, so many trucks, and the truck should have a certain level of staffing, that is the standard that we should aspire to. Now, again, there is always reality comes in, and you have to look at things like funding and so on, but ultimately I think the technical part of the discussion is what is that level of, you know, with respect to the national standard, you know, and with respect to the number of sigmas, where should we be? You know, where should this township be? And I think that you can't answer that other than looking at the, you know, some sort of national standards, because we can't establish our own standards for, we don't have the statistical level of calls to establish those standards locally.
I just wanted to comment that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jessica Schneck. I live in Von Steuben in Glen Hardy, SCHNECK. I just wanted to comment that if you have the need to have a backup fire truck come to get your 4 people, that's an extra truck on the road. That's unnecessary. And if all of the local supports are only staffing 2 people on each truck, isn't that even more wasteful? It just doesn't make sense if you look at it big picture. So, just.
And those 2 people that are staffed are actually on the ambulances. So it's the you know, if we're only guaranteeing staffing for one ambulance at each station, they're on an ambulance. So it's really the volunteers, I think, that we're depending on, and then some extra hours here and there, but yeah. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, I think we'll close this discussion today. Obviously, this is still the beginning of a long process, and I know it's getting late. So new matters, do we have any board member new matters tonight? All right, do we have any citizen new matters?
Good evening, I'm Jenna Brennan. I live at 131 Brookmead in Wayne. I believe this is a new matter. I'm having trouble finding documentation on it. I want to raise a concern over the municipal trash collection RFP. It seems to have been introduced in the July meeting perhaps, but I haven't been able to find the minutes or transcripts to give me any details on that. I participate in a news group. Basically, I live between 252 and Glen Hardy, and that entire area has a civic group email distribution, and I think since the beginning of the summer, I've been seeing pretty alarming emails about Blazinski not honoring their responsibility. I haven't been particularly, I empathize with my neighbors, but I haven't been particularly upset about it because I'm a whitetail customer, but now it's starting to impact me since I'm hearing we've just gone out to RFP for municipal trash collection. I'm a little, and it's going to be awarded on September 18th, the RFP to someone, and I don't feel like we have any transparency into where we are in that process, who's bidding, is Whitetail, is Blazinski. I mean, I certainly hope Blazinski's not in the running. I mean, they should be. I'm looking at other townships like East Whiteland that are having similar issues with them. They're issuing citations. I've tried to look into the code. I don't see any that the existing code supports just switching to municipal trash collection. I believe ordinances would need to change. So I'm really trying to understand how do we get information on this, and I know I'm not the only person in my community that has a lot of, that would want to have the kind of discussion that we just had over fire and ambulance services. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have anything. I guess I'm looking for a status update at this point to understand what I can do after this.
Sure. It was discussed to ask staff to look into bids and the solicitor to develop an ordinance for single hauler. It doesn't mean, again, that's not committing to doing it. The bids were opened on Thursday. So at this point, we're reviewing the bids for completion. There were 3 bidders. I can tell you they're Belinsky, Whitetail, and Mascaro. Republic and Waste Management declined to bid at this point due to the timing to be able to put it into service by January 1. So we're reviewing the bids for completion at this point. Again, this is something that the board will have a full discussion on at their next meeting in September as to whether they want to accept the bids, reject the bids. Those are their options. We can stay with what we have. I know I live in the area too, so Belinsky has been a challenge since they were purchased by a national chain. They said they're working on that. They were participating in the bid process, and they were one of the bidders, obviously, that we're reviewing. So yeah, they're still up in the air at this point. And in the September meeting, we'll have a full discussion as to if those bids are good. That's what we're doing, staff's doing now the next 2 weeks to make sure they're all complete, checking references, and all those things, make sure the bid bonds and all the proper materials. So, and the reason why you didn't see any minutes yet, because they adopted them tonight, they'll be up for the July meeting.
Sort of picked that up,
yes.
yeah.
So yeah, it's in the bid process, and then we'll come back and have a full discussion, and the board will have to make a decision if that's something they want to pursue between now and January 1. So,
Okay, great. So that'll be on the agenda for
Yes, absolutely.
next month, and I'll make sure my neighbors know that. I guess just the feedback is, 2 things that have kind of surfaced is the questioning if this would be more expensive in the long run for the township. I don't know if that sort of assessment. We have one engineer on the team that has been pretty vocal that he thinks this is not the best use of it would turn out to be more expensive for us all in the long run.
Yeah, but
I
you
don't know if
never know.
that's true.
Potentially, it could, look, to be honest, it's not the greatest time to go for trash bids anywhere, and that, state or national, because everyone's struggling to find workers for these kind of positions, so they're all dealing with that. It's not just Belinsky. Some are doing a little better, some aren't. But yeah, there's no way to guarantee it'll be exactly the same with what you had or can negotiate, because it'll be the one contract for the entire township. So
Yeah,
there
and
are
I
also
think
advantages.
I think the fear is Blazen's. I mean, obviously, there's going to be, I think, a
but
lot of
there's also an
upset.
advantage because now it's easier. You can schedule your people. Every house is being picked up on your route as opposed to skipping every 2 or 3. So there's pluses and minuses, and we'll have to see where the bids fall in place and whether it's worthwhile to make that switch.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just wanted to address one of your questions. Ms. Brennan, you had said you couldn't find the meeting minutes from the July meeting. If you looked at the agenda for today's meeting, those minutes are included with today's meeting. They are in a little different order than you would usually see them. You have to go down to page 55 of the entire packet, but they are there. You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other citizen new matters?
Jamie Barons, I'm Townsend Circle. Our street's half Chester County, half Montgomery County, Upper Marion's on the other side. Everybody now is AJ Belinsky on trash. People across the street pay about a third less than we pay. This township has high fee structures. That has hurt. We used to have 8 trash haulers in here, and now we're down to effectively 1 or 2. What's going to happen if you award a monopoly contract for 3 years and they can't man it? What options do people have? Can we go out and get our own contracts if your contract fails? What are you going to give us for an escape option? Because this is a problem in the area with manning and crewing, and awarding a monopoly contract to one company does not solve it. There's nothing in your bids that's your request for bidding that locks them in, commits them, or guarantees, except for fines, which, if they bid the right language, you can't fine them, because if they have manpower shortages, sicknesses, illnesses, that's part of the business. And you're gonna have a tough time enforcing that. If right now, if we had 3 or 4 companies who are working all across the township, somebody screws up, you just switch companies. We've already seen big increases. The way the contract's structured is gonna be another big increase. Monopolies are not cheaper. So, and the other thing is, why is this being rushed? What's January 1st so magical? There's no discussion on what the costs are going to be for the household, how you're going to divide the billings. I have neighbors who are seniors. They make maybe one kitchen trash bag a week of trash. So they consolidate and they have one contract they work under. You going to still allow that? Or are you going to make it a mandatory every address has to have the delivery and pay the fees? There's a lot of things on this. There's no clarity to us as to what you're trying to do. And I don't understand what the rush is. Yes, AJ blew a few deliveries. They've blown it, so what? Garbage smells from a little more the next week. It's never been more than a week before they've gone through. Yes, it's not great, but this is not like what's happened in New York and Philly and places where you have mountains of garbage piling up. This is something that's solvable if you work with companies and encourage multiple companies and let them compete. I don't see how what you're looking at is going to do anything good.
So I encourage you to come to our meeting. It's not on our agenda tonight, so we don't have the specifics to really react to your comments, but it'll be on the agenda, and please come out and share your thoughts. That will be the appropriate
What's the
time.
rush about getting this contract out in 30 days? Why is this the hurry?
Well, yeah, that's just a normal bid process. January 1 was selected because of we lost Republic. The board had asked, and the ACA looked to want to go single hauler, and it seemed like a proper time to do it in the beginning of a year. And to your other second point, yeah, so realistically, and to be quite honest, if you're going to bid this out, it's going to be whatever, depending on the lowest bid, and if we were to approve it, it will be a single charge per resident. So yeah, whether you put one bag out or 6 bag, within the toter, we can't make special exceptions for people who have less trash, that type of thing. So that's a good question. That's one that I can answer for you. It's going to be a uniform application, and that's one of the pluses or minuses, depending how you look at it, of bidding out single.
So why don't you leave an opt-out? Because if we don't like the service, we can go and get our own contract.
If once you go, that's the plus or minus. If you want to go single hauler, it's single hauler. We can't. And then what we had before.
Well, why don't you let us have the option of opting out?
Because I don't like we can't bid the contract. That's the problem. We bid the contract for based on the services and the residents that are on the street. Can't have it. Would be back to what we had. That's the board's gonna have to make that decision. It's definitely a policy.
And put it as a referendum. Let people vote whether they want this or not. You're making a huge change in the township.
So they've made no commitment. So they have this. Well, we're gonna have this discussion in September. They have made no commitment. All we did is get bids.
But you have not talked to the people out in the street. 99% of the residents have no clue what you're doing with this stuff. This is a big change.
May I jump in, sir? I don't know where you came up with the 99% number, but we have heard a lot of complaints about trash issues, and this is something that input has been coming in from the residents for a long time to make this change. We have spent time, staff has spent time working on this, and I would invite you to come to the September meeting and voice your views and hear from the other 1%, since you seem to have the 99% number at your fingertips. That's not been our experience.
Nobody in my neighborhood knew about it. How many people out there, there's no newsletter going out explaining what you're doing. There's no one explaining how the changes are going to be implemented. There's no one explaining what the costs are going to be.
That's because we don't know them yet. We haven't received the bids. All we've done is allowed the bids to go out.
And how are you going to explain it if you're going to award the contract in a month?
I encourage you to come to the September meeting and voice
You're missing the point. You should have a 60-day period where this is communicated. Why aren't you sending a newsletter out to the residents saying, this is what we've got for bids, this is what your new cost will be?
Well, we haven't gotten the bids yet.
You're not doing anything like that to tell people.
All right.
Why not?
Sir, I know your street really well, and it's a small street. And so maybe you didn't notice it. I live on a really small street too, where they've gone 2 weeks without picking up. Just last week they didn't pick up. And they go more than a week. And I think maybe this has to do with who neighbors have as their provider. My neighborhood is a pretty big neighborhood, and most people use Blazinski, and it has been tons of trash piled up since in the spring. Like all my neighbors' houses, I know I put out on my separate supervisor Facebook page, everybody send us your comments on this. I don't, Mr. Martin, do you have, or maybe Pat has an estimate of how much correspondence we've gotten?
Some of the staff has been tracking, resident complaints with respect to missed trash and that. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, is it over 100 or less than 100?
I don't want to venture to guess.
Nobody I know has seen anything.
Well,
Panhandle Association.
I mean, my neighborhood site has talked a ton about it. They're aware of these discussions.
Mine is too.
I've seen it in
So why haven't you sent out notices?
We've had a newsletter. You mentioned the newsletter. I think we did have one on single haulers by the EAC maybe. This is something that's actually been worked on for multiple years by the EAC before it came to us, and we've had multiple meetings where people have come out, and the last one where we did the RFP, there was actually a lively discussion. A lot of people came out. But September is another opportunity, so I encourage you to come. All right, thank you very much.
And we'll actually have information in September so you can react.
Yeah.
I really don't care who collects my trash, whether it's a municipal service, whether it's an individual who happens to come by with a pickup truck because he's trying to earn a few extra dollars, or a giant corporation with hundreds of trucks and thousands of employees. Really doesn't matter to me. What does matter is that the stuff is collected on time when I expect it to be collected, because I put it out in the right time of day, at the right day of the week, and it's still there 3 days later and 4 days later. I would like you, no matter how many applicants, how many bids you've received for this service, I would like you to get on the telephone, and I would like you to call customer service. And I would like you to see how long it takes for them to answer the phone, whether you get a real person or an answering machine that takes a recorded message and promises to call you back and doesn't, and see what kind of service the person who actually answers the phone provides for you, whether you get the service that you want and expect or not. We've had Blazinski since the Republic gave up our area. We've been displeased with Blazinski since they were bought by Waste Connections Incorporated, whose corporate headquarters is in Texas. I have called Blazinski on many occasions this summer because our trash was not collected or the recycle was not collected. I was like caller number 16 and waited a half an hour and got an answering machine and left a message and was never called back. I called on another occasion. I was caller number 25. Maybe they're making this stuff up. I don't know, but that's what they said. That's what the automated voice said. Well, I waited another 45 minutes to talk to somebody, and I got another answering machine. On one occasion, this entire summer, I spoke to a real, living, breathing human being on the other end of the line. And while we were talking about it, and I was telling him that our trash was not collected, we were disconnected. Well, we actually got a call back from Blazinski, and the woman who called us said that the person I spoke with looked into the matter, which I was very pleased to hear, and surprised, quite frankly, but I was still pleased, and said that, guess what? My collection route was left off the work order for that day. The person who dispatches the trucks did not bother to put my area on the work order, so the truck didn't come by. Now, I am standing here simply to tell you, if you are going to consider any offers, take Blazinski's offer and put it in the shredder. I would not work with Blazinski for another minute if I could find somebody else who would do the stuff without inconveniencing the whole business with all kinds of rules and regulations, like what color trash bag I'm supposed to use, as I understand Whitetail does. I may be incorrect, but that's my understanding. I would like it to be a simple and clean process, and I would like to be able to contact someone who will respond when there is a problem. I tried calling Blazinski, as I said, on many occasions in total failure. Then I tried contacting their parent company in Texas, and guess what? When I dialed the number for the parent company, guess who they connected me to? Blazinski. So I don't know what you know about contacting the people who are responsible for this, but you darn well better add that to your research. How do you make sure you will be able to handle the complaints that you undoubtedly will get? Now, even with the best company, you're going to get some complaints. Nobody's ever happy with everything. We know that. But at the same time, you've got to be able to handle them. Do you want to do this? Do you really want to do this? Who in the township is going to get on the telephone every time somebody calls up to complain?
All right, thank you. Again, it's the next meeting, so it's not on the agenda tonight. So let's move this along.
I understand. I just wanted to make that quite clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Ray Clark again. Can you indulge me 1 minute on trees? Back to trees. We heard that they're great and all the reasons they're great. We heard that their tree canopy is threatened naturally and by human interaction. And you've taken a great step to kind of regulating the human interaction. Open Land Conservancy is working on the other side of things and planting more trees. So Mr. Lander kind of mentioned that. I just want to reinforce. October the 7th, a great volunteer opportunity for anybody who's concerned about tree canopy. 500 trees in Valley Creek Preserve. Anybody can help. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, volunteers of all shapes and sizes. The money for this is coming from grant money. The township worked with us to get money from PICO for part of it. It's a great collaborative community effort, and it all goes to helping the tree canopy and all the benefits. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other citizen comments?
Hi, I'm Jack McAllister. I've lived in this neighborhood for 54 years. I'm 86. I formed the Valley Forge Civic Association with 550 people in it now. I run a health group with 150 people in it. And I worked on a stormwater group when we were evaluating a Trout Creek overlay ordinance for the Township Board of Supervisors. I come tonight to talk again about the unintended consequences of your ordinance, which is HR 454. I didn't know what the ordinance was, and thanks a lot, Patricia, for sending it to me. I appreciate it. The ordinance itself basically says that one of the purposes is to promote recyclable material within the township. I venture to say that this ordinance has some unintended consequences. The unintended consequence is that by charging 15 cents for paper bags, you are promoting the use of plastic bags for the garbage. And the problem with the plastic bags is we know that the entire United States water supply is contaminated by the landfills leaching out nanoplastics and as well as microplastics, which are xenoestrogen and they're cancer producing. They're filterable by carbon filters in your little jugs. So what I'm trying to say is that by promoting the not using paper bags, you're promoting the use of these plastic bags. And these plastic bags are your problem. The paper bags are not your problem. So now I no longer use paper bags for my garbage. I'm starting to use these, which is crazy, okay? And you're promoting the use of these bags instead of paper, which is fine, except even using these bags don't have paper bags home for me to use for my garbage instead of these. So I believe you have some very serious unintended consequences of promoting plastic into the landfills where your goal was not to do that. And so I would venture to say you want to promote the use of paper wherever you can. And I think that's wonderful. The ordinance is exceptionally well written, but by trying to dissuade people from using paper, I think you're making a huge mistake. And so I'd like you to remove all references to the lack of use of paper, and even, that's my phone, unfortunately. I can shut it off. So I think I'll get out of here because I don't want to waste your time, but I think you missed the point with your ordinance. You have unintended consequences because you're promoting these instead of paper, which is recyclable. And I would basically venture to say use of all plastics everywhere, including Ziploc bags instead of paper bags. I went to school with paper bags. Ziploc bags are anything that touches food should not be plastic. That means all the water bottles, or now if you go look, you can still buy Coke in bottles. Okay, it's called Mexican Coke, and you can buy it. It's double the price, but nevertheless, it's better Coke. So I'll leave that to you, and it's the ordinance. And I can basically give you a listing of all the points that I would remove, but it's HR 454 is the ordinance, I think, that is promoting the wrong thing. It's promoting the right thing, getting rid of plastics, but promoting the wrong thing by promoting the lack of use of paper bags. And paper should be promoted everywhere because it's biodegradable, whereas this stuff is not. And promoting the use of these bags also promotes, no, paper bags is promoting this. Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and this is another great bag from Wegmans, 99 cents, terrific, not recyclable, but it's reusable. But eventually it's going to go into the dump, and it has nice plastic piece in here. The whole thing is made of plastic. Not a good idea. Cloth is a much better idea. But again, you're promoting the lack of use of paper. All right, thanks. Good night, guys.
All right, thank you. Any other citizen comments tonight? All right, our next meeting is September 18th, 2023. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, do we have a second? All in favor? We are adjourned.